TikTok time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. Your friendly neighborhood philosopher here, D Wood. With me now, I've got the two Tonys, Tony 1 and Tony 2. Who's Tony 1 and who's Tony 2? No, I'm just going to stick with Anthony. I'm just going to stick with Anthony for 1 and Tony for 2. But it's interesting because I've called Anthony for years, and he pointed out that he normally goes by Tony, and why'd you put Anthony just because you were writing just because you were writing that for articles or something?
Yeah, I told you this years ago, so sometimes you'll call me Tony, but I was filling out something that seemed official. You know, when you go to a bank or something, you put your full name, not your nickname. And I just am used to filling out things in a full way on something like that. And it was either answering Islam or even something like Facebook or something. I was just putting in my full name. And then a bunch of people came to know me through that, and I didn't bother trying to say, call me Tony.
Yeah, your profile name back in the day on Blogger, and then all your articles for Answering Islam said Anthony, so I just knew you as Anthony, and then you didn't correct it until I've been calling you Anthony for a decade. And
yeah, my birth name is Antonio, by the way, Dave. Antonio, like Antonio Banderas.
Hey, so, Antonio.
That's my birth certificate. It says Antonio Manuel. But I've always gone by.
Do you carry around a guitar case with a bunch of guns in it?
That's a different Antonio, man.
Isn't that Antonio. The one that's...
It's Antonio Banderas, man.
Banderas.
Yeah, that's a different Antonio. That's what I said.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm agreeing with you, man. Hey, I've told this before, but this is when Nabil was still a Muslim, but we're on a school trip, and I think we're riding in a minivan with some other students and stuff. Anyway, we got hungry, and we couldn't find anything was open until we found this Italian restaurant that was open. So it's road trip. We stop at this. It's actually nice Italian restaurant, and I forget. I don't remember if it was when we were walking in or when we were leaving, but there was some sort of like wedding party there or something like that, or they had something. They had some event there because people were all dressed up nice and stuff. But they're all Italians. They're all Italians in this Italian restaurant, which is a good sign that it's a good Italian restaurant. If you see a bunch of Italians there, so it's always my criterion. If I walk into a Chinese restaurant and there's a bunch of Chinese people in there, I'm like, okay, this is the good stuff. This is how you know this is good stuff. Anyway, so we're in there. We're standing in the parking lot, and the whole like wedding party or whoever it is out there in front. And I go, yo, Nabil, watch this. Hey, Tony! And, and all these people turned around like I was talking to them, and I was like, man, we just started cracking up laughing. Fun times. All right, well, you guys heard of this Cameron Bertuzzi troublemaker?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep, so here's what you got, everyone. Some people think that it's just the orthobros. You look at the stuff we've been accomplishing over the past decade or two. We've got Dawa was on the march. It was very aggressive. It was coming after everyone. And then we started crushing it. We started training people to crush it. And then more people were crushing it. Then they start screaming about the avalanche of apostasy and all this. And you think, wow, this Dawa is about done. And just when it's about done, everyone says, you know what? We all need to start. Everyone who's actually dealing with Dawa needs to start fighting over other things. And we say, no, why don't we deal with Dawa and we can deal with it? Or the people who are already doing that kind of discussion can continue doing that discussion. The people who are doing this can keep doing this. And we found out, no, we all have to be dealing with this stuff right now. And so you got the orthobros. You've got the orthobros. They're the ones running defense for all the Dawa clowns. But wanted to point out, it's not just the orthobros. We've also got Cameron Bertuzzi. No, I've been on Cam's channel a bunch of times. He's been on my channel a bunch of times. But out of nowhere, he posted a vicious attack against me. Actually, I don't even know. I haven't watched it yet, but we're gonna watch it. We're gonna watch it live, guys. I'm guessing this is just because I've been hearing basically over and over again, Protestants can't agree that they have can't believe they have a reliable canon without affirming either the Eastern Orthodox Church or the Catholic Church. It's weird. Catholics say we have to affirm their authority if we want our canon, and Orthodox say we have to affirm their authority if we want to believe in the canon, and so on. And I've heard talks of a dilemma circulating and so on. So I think Cameron has a Bible dilemma. That's what I've heard. And I'm not sure how different or similar this is from a video he posted about Wes Huff, but he posted a sort of challenge to Wes Huff, saying Wes Huff can't answer this. Haven't seen that either. But I heard he recycled the argument and then just directed it towards me, probably because I'm more likely to respond in a live stream if Cameron is thinking, oh, I want to back and forth on this to really, really distract everyone from what they're doing. All right. So smart.
It's choose two big names that will get a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get it from one, choose the other. Maybe if you didn't respond, he'd pick a third. But it's definitely good YouTube, good strategy.
Yeah, hey, that's interesting. You went for me, went for Wes Huff, didn't go for the Orthobros. That's weird, because they don't even have an official canon over there in the Orthodox Church. That's weird, right? All right, good. All right, guys, so we're going to check out Cameron's video. It's titled something like this Bible problem David Wood can't answer, or something David Wood can't answer, or something like that. We're going to go ahead and watch it all. We're going to go ahead and watch it all and see. I hope there's not a bunch of music in here. It's going to give me a copyright issue or something, but we'll see. Let's take these first couple super chats, then check it out. Tony looked like Anthony Rogers, just 10 years younger and handsome. Zero out of 10. No, you're a retard, dude, from Cameron. Really? Is that what it's going to be? That'd be funny. Hey, gentlemen, I love that you guys are doing these lives, and I hope there's more. Learning where we disagree with Orthodox and Catholics has been super interesting. Love from Protestant Segara Cartel. Yep, we're the Mexican Protestants. The Mexican Protestants. All right, guys, we're ready to check out Cameron's video.
That's good.
All right. Hey, don't embarrass yourself, Cameron. This better be good and not a complete waste of time. Let's check it out.
Okay, so what is the Islamic dilemma? What is that? Where did it come from? Because it's everywhere online right now.
That's something we've been trying to popularize for a long, long time. And you can find it mentioned by Christians going way back. People who they're not putting it like that. They haven't weaponized it. We've weaponized it.
That is David Wood, one of the most watched Christian apologists on the internet and best known as a vocal defender of the Islamic dilemma, an argument that's been wrecking Muslim apologists online for years. David Wood is a Protestant. So what happens when we use similar reasoning against his own Protestant beliefs? Let's find out. By the end of this video, you'll be able to run this argument yourself in one sentence on any Protestant who tells you that the early church wasn't Catholic. And honestly, the craziest
wasn't Catholic.
Yeah.
I thought it was supposed to be Orthodox. Hey, Cameron and all you Orthobros, can you guys fight it out and figure out which one I have to affirm if I want to affirm any canon at all, and which church I have to affirm the authority of? Because you're both saying the exact same thing.
David, let me just add something. The early church was Catholic in the context of that word Catholic, meaning global, universal. So we have no issues with that language. It's in the creeds, like the Apostles' Creed. But what he means by Catholic is a very important qualifier. He means Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. So, but again, the word Catholic in and of itself was used by the early fathers to refer to the church global, the global church that is made up of all peoples. And so it's a very important qualifier I think we need to make.
Okay, so you're saying that when someone brings this up, we should say, of course it was Catholic, just not what you mean by Catholic, not Roman Catholic. They meant Catholic as they meant Catholic, not as you meant Catholic. And would we therefore say that people who don't clarify that might be guilty of equivocation when they're arguing like this?
100%.
Okay,
and an anachronism, right? So every Sunday at church, we confess in the church I go to, we confess the Apostles' Creed, or on select Sundays, the Nicene Creed. And so it's very familiar language to anybody in a mainline Protestant church. And it's all throughout the literature. Nobody familiar with any of the literature bats an eye at this sort of thing. But these guys know that when they use this terminology, the vast majority of people don't know that nuance. So they can say it and be technically right, at least in terms of the language they're using, but not necessarily right in what they're conveying.
Yeah, and same with the word orthodox. I mean, the early church was orthodox in that she held to the truths, the rule, the regula fide, the rule of faith, but they were not Eastern Orthodox the way, Constantinople wants to use that term. So we believe that the early church was Orthodox. She is Orthodox. She's Catholic, but not Roman Catholic and not Eastern Orthodox Constantinople type or Orthodox Christians. So again, it's a very nuanced term, but we need to keep those words in context. Very important.
All right. So clean up your act, Cameron. Quit trying to trick everyone with this stuff.
Part of this video is
What's that?
I was just gonna say, there's a bunch of stuff in the chat, like people don't get what's going on. So Sugarman, for example, here says, this is Catholic hating for 5 hours then? Doesn't realize this is a video responding to a Catholic engaging in Protestant hating. If this is how we're going to cast this, right?
Isn't this hilarious?
And,
I'm saying the orthobros are the exact same. Like it'll go like this. Hey, David, you can't just go after Islam. You have to debate us on the true church. Like, I'm not interested. But you have to. We're going to attack you. We're going to call you grifter. We're going to whine about you all day, every day. Look, I'm seriously not interested. And we're going to attack everyone else, too. We're going to attack everyone. We're going to attack everyone who's going after Islam until you all debate us. Stop running. Stop running. Okay, fine, I'll debate you guys. Oh, my goodness, why is he persecuting us? Why is he obsessed with us? Every single freaking time. And you have it here, too. Cameron Bertuzzi posted in case you missed the intro, Cameron Bertuzzi posted a video. Protestants can't answer this. David Wood can't answer this. Ha, you guys don't have a canon. It's going to be something like that. Okay, are we supposed to respond or not? If we don't respond, you guys say, well, oh, look, you're running because you can't answer it. If we respond, then it's, oh, my goodness, why are you hating on Catholics? Guys, just shut up. Just shut up and quit whining. Look, Shugami82. If you don't like me, D. Wood, responding to a Catholic who's calling me out in a video, posting my name in his video, saying this, Protestants can't answer this stuff. If you don't want me to respond, then you go talk to your Catholic apologists and tell them quit running your mouth about David Wood. He's already doing stuff. But don't whine to me when I answer a video that's a challenge. All right? So quit whining. Will the persecution never end? Besides, all you Catholics who are watching, you got the Catholics and you got the Orthodox who kind of think like I do. Hey, if we're dealing with Islam, then we're dealing with Islam. We're all on the same page because Islam has the same goal and agenda for all of us here. We're all kind of on the same page. We're in the same boat, so we can all be on the same page with Islam. You have Catholics who are like that, Orthodox who are like that. You've got Protestants who are like that, and so on. But for the ones who all want to argue with each other. Yeah, you go and if you don't like that, go deal with them. Go deal with them. We have this. Look, we got from Too Many Marys. I prefer the better Tony. That's good. We all prefer the better Tony. All right, ready? Let's check this out.
Yep.
Who tells you that the early church wasn't Catholic. And honestly, the craziest part of this video is that David Wood himself.
I forgot what I was pointing out. I was pointing out that for those of you Catholics and Orthodox who actually agree with Cameron or with the Orthobros or whoever, that we, Protestants, we just don't know what books to believe in unless we agree with the authority of the Roman Catholic Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church. And other than that, we don't know what to believe about books. And that if we actually investigate this, we'll realize, oh my goodness, we have to acknowledge the authority of the Roman Catholic Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church, depending on who's using the argument. If you actually believe that, why you should want us looking into this, right? You should want us going through the argument and trying to respond, because we're not going to be able to respond, right? We're just going to, oh wow, we can't respond to this, huh? I guess we need to become Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox, one or the other. We have to, right? You should be happy. Why would you whine and complain when we actually pay attention to the argument and go through the argument? And don't be just thinking about us. Maybe you think Anthony Rogers and that Tony Costa, man, they're hard-hearted. They're hard-hearted in rebellion. David, maybe he's a little better. Maybe he's open-minded. We don't know. But you got the people in the chat, right? You got people in the chat over here. And if they see, wow, Cameron's argument is airtight. The two Tonys and David have nothing to say in response. Oh, my goodness. You should be happy about that. So anyway, quit whining. All right, we ready? Here we go.
Is going to supply every premise we need on camera in his own words.
Wait, did he say me?
At the end of this video, you'll be able to run this argument
What's that?
You're going to do all that. You're
Cool,
doing
cool,
all the
cool,
heavy
cool.
lifting here.
Cool. Let's see.
yourself in one sentence on any Protestant who tells you that the early church wasn't Catholic. And honestly, the craziest part of this video is that David Wood himself is going to supply every premise we need on camera in his own words.
Well, that's good, because, if I'm supplying the premises, then your argument's airtight. Hey, it sounds like Cameron is granting my authority in all matters. If he's going to agree with premises that I've laid down, then he has to grant my authority and reliability in every area and can't question anything I believe. I'm just pointing that out because that's what I hear, guys. Hey, if you think this guy's right about this, then you have to grant everything he said, and therefore, I hope that's not where this is going, but that's kind of what I hear. If you agree with this guy on this, then you have to agree with everything that guy said. No, I don't think that's true. No, it's true. Okay, well, if you're agreeing with my premises here, you have to agree with everything I say, and I'm now the new pope, apparently. All right. Let's hear what he's saying, though.
So some quick introductions. If you don't know who David Wood is, he is a philosopher. He's got a PhD from Fordham, founder of Acts 17 Apologetics, probably the most influential Christian voice in Christian-Muslim debate of the last 20 years. That opening clip was from Pints with Aquinas, Matt Fradd's show. Matt's Catholic. He's a friend of the channel. And yes, he's the same Matt Fradd that I debated back when I was Protestant. So lately, Wood's been going after Eastern Orthodoxy as well, which, as viewers of this channel know, is a hobby that I can respect. And if you don't know what the Islamic dilemma is, here it is in a nutshell from an infographic video David made 11 years ago. Let's watch.
The Quran puts Muslims in an inescapable dilemma.
Hey, the music is from me.
Either Christians have the inspired, preserved, authoritative Word of God, or we don't. Those are the only two possibilities. If we have the inspired, preserved, authoritative Word of God, Islam is false, because Islam contradicts what we have. If we don't have the inspired, preserved, authoritative Word of God, Islam is false, because the Quran affirms the inspiration, preservation, and authority of our book. So if the gospel is the Word of God, Islam is false. If the gospel isn't the Word of God, Islam is false. Either way, Islam is false.
The Quran stakes Muhammad's credibility on scriptures that contradict Islam. Trustworthy scriptures? Islam is false. Corrupt scriptures? Islam is false. The Quran affirms them. There is no third option, and to be fair, David did not invent this. Christians like Georgia Beltan have been making versions of it for over 1,000 years. Guys like Sam Shamoon and Avery Godlogic defend it today. What Wood did, in his word, is weaponize it. Well, here's the part that matters.
I didn't mean me in particular. I meant that the kind of new generation going back in the 2005, early basically 2000 to 2015. What we now call the Islamic, basically pointing out what the Quran says about the previous scriptures. Back in the day, it was kind of used by Muslims to say, hey, why are you attacking us? Why are you attacking our book? Why are you attacking our doctrines when your Quran says nice things about our book and your Quran doesn't say this? So they kind of used it defensively. Why are you attacking? Why are you attacking our scriptures? Why are you mocking our doctrines? Your book says nothing but nice things about our book. It calls us the people of the book. What are you doing? And they're pointing out. They're quoting like Surah 1094. That seemed to be the most common one for a long time. Yeah, what we did, we turned it into an offensive argument against Islam. This proves that Islam is false. It affirms our scriptures, says nothing but good things about our scriptures, and contradicts our scriptures on fundamental doctrines. And so when you guys say our book's been corrupted, if our book's been corrupted, Islam is false. So you guys got problems here. So we kind of turned it into that. I was one of the people who played a role in that.
And besides that, I mean, so I started reading the Quran in prison. I think you probably did too. I'm not sure. I know that certainly when Nabil came along, you were in earnest diving into everything. But I read the Quran, and I remember I was reading it because I knew there were Muslims around me, and I wanted to be able to engage them. And I remember being shocked for the first time talking to a Muslim, and he denied the integrity of the scriptures. I thought, what are you talking about? I read your book. I'm like, your book doesn't say that. And it was just so shocking to me. I thought, this is like outlandish. Like your book is filled with positive statements about my book. I didn't get the slightest indication that the Quran was putting the Bible down or out or anything like that. And then as I read other books, this was just common fare, right? One of the books that I read early on, it had a different title at one point, but now it's called something like Sharing Your Faith with a Muslim. The author's name, I think it's a pseudonym too, but it's Abdiya Akbar Abdul Haq. In that book, he's got like 2 solid chapters. He wrote it in the 1980s, 2 solid chapters on the Islamic dilemma. And of course, we're just talking modern history here, but my point is just to say, this is the sort of thing that's been just stock in trade for Christians for a long time. It's gotten a good bit more notoriety because of YouTube and people like you on YouTube, but also Answering Islam. Answering Islam, you can go on there right now and read articles from decades ago of people talking about this, right? I don't know if Tony has one on there or not, but I wouldn't be surprised. But Tony's one of the first people I saw engaging Muslims in public debate. I remember seeing him debate Shabir Ali back in the day. So anyways, I'm just pointing out, as you did already, David, that this is pretty standard, but popularizing it, putting it out there, making it known, putting it in people's hands, I don't think anything has been like that. It's since relatively modern times. I mean, it's definitely taken off.
Yeah, the Islamic dilemma basically took off and became popular last year, to where, I mean, there were always, again, going back over 1,000 years, you had Christians using similar reasoning that we're using now. But yeah, last year is where it somehow filtered down to where way more Christians were using it, just like regular Christians were picking up on the argument and were able to start pulling it, using verses when they're interacting with their Muslim friends. So, the problem was already there in the Quran, guys. The problem was already there when Muhammad is delivering the Quran. The problem is already there. The Quran is affirming these scriptures that contradict the Quran. Christians picked up on it here and there over the centuries. Now, tons of Christians are picking up on it. And so we're pointing out the problem that's always been there. Basically, the Quran came with its own self-destruct button, and we're pushing that thing.
And by the way, it's also the case that even before Christians, you have Muslims. They're not presenting it as a dilemma, but they're basically conceding the main propositions. So Muqatil, who's the earliest commentator we have on the Quran, is affirming essentially that the Quran says the Bible has been preserved and is authoritative. And then, in fact, I've just been doing a bunch of stuff on the Sirah in preparation for something I'm going to do, and it's remarkable. There's no assertion of falsification in the Sirah. In Ibn Yitzhak's Sirat Rasulullah, he constantly is making positive reference to the scriptures, claiming that Muhammad can be found there, that the Jews and Christians have it with them. Everybody's familiar with this in the Quran, and that's the main text to go to. That's not a text that they can do much to sideline, right? But the Sirah is full of it too. It's all over the place in the Sirah literature. So this is something Muslims were quite on board with in principle in the past.
Yeah, and it's funny, if you go back to Muqatil, all the Yeah, almost all the verses that Muslims try to twist into saying the Bible's been corrupted, saying that Christians, Jews and Christians distort our scriptures and things like that. He only thinks that two verses are actually talking about Jews and Christians doing something to the text of the scriptures. But it's funny, it's just to remove prophecies about Muhammad, right? Because this is the issue. This was the early issue that arose. The Quran is saying, "Hey, Muhammad is prophesied in the scriptures of these Jews and Christians," and people where's this at? Oh, they took those parts out, and so that's what's kind of funny in all this. The earliest Muslims who were saying, you've got Muslims who are saying, nope, that none of the text can be corrupted or altered. When you do find arising Muslims who are claiming that no, the text has something in the text has changed, it was the prophecies about Muhammad were taken out or they were changed so that they wouldn't be affirming Muhammad. Other than that, the scriptures are as good as gold. Other than that, the scriptures are good as gold. Now, why that's funny is the modern Muslim position is the reverse. Oh, yeah, the Bible contains prophecies about Muhammad right there. Deuteronomy 18:18. Oh, right there. John 14:16. Yep, you got the prophecies right there. It's the rest of the Bible that's been corrupted. So they've completely reversed the position. So anyway, the issue is, it's like, why do Muslims keep having these various positions? One, saying that, nope, all their scriptures are good as gold. It's just they're interpreting it wrongly. That's the position. That's the actual position of the Quran. To no, it is talking. Nope. The Quran does indicate that that they've changed their scriptures. Oh, okay. What? Why are you saying? Well, because we can't find the prophecies about Muhammad. You must have changed those. But the rest of it's all good. You had all these positions up until now, where all our theology and everything has been corrupted. And it's because this problem is in the Quran, guys. This problem is in the Quran. And Anthony's pointing out, like, Muslims had to try and figure out how to deal with that. Now Christians are figuring out way more, how to respond to it and how to use what the Quran says. And then you've got Cameron Bertuzzi, who uses this as an opportunity to attack Protestants and derail the whole thing. Great job, Cameron. Great job.
For the rest of this video, okay, notice how this weapon works. It never attacks Islam from the outside. It asks one question: what do your own sources commit you to? And then it lets the Muslim's own book do the rest. All right, so then let's ask David Wood's question of David Wood himself. Here's a fact about the New Testament that most Christians go their entire lives without noticing. The Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts, 2 volumes, one author, together over a quarter of the entire New Testament, more than Paul, and Paul wrote 13 of these things, have nobody's name on them. Go check. The word Luke never appears in either book. So how do we know that Luke wrote them? That's not some gotcha from me. Okay, that is a live weapon that skeptics fire constantly. It's one of Bart Ehrman's favorite arguments. And if you don't know who Ehrman is, he's the agnostic Bible scholar whose book sit on pretty much every skeptic's shelf. Muslim apologists love it too. In fact, a Muslim debater named Bassam Zawadi fired it directly at David Wood in a debate called "Does the Evidence Show That Christianity is True?"
Hey, that's funny. He's got this debate. I don't even have this debate. This was
he was digging into the archives.
Yeah. And I think the reason, I probably have it backed up on like a hard drive from like 20 years ago or something like this, but
makes you wonder if he's been talking to someone.
It's funny. I think this debate was in a Salafi. I know. I think this debate was in a Salafi mosque. Oh yeah, you're right, Anthony. Where's Cameron getting this stuff from? I think. I'm trying to think of how many times I debated Bassam Zawadi. If this is the one, we did 2 debates in a Salafi mosque, and it was pretty funny because we went in there, and I wasn't. People didn't know who I was back then. I wasn't popular, so I put it out. I don't even remember. I didn't remember where I put it out, but I notified someone somehow. That I don't, because this is before. Like, I think I posted this on Google Videos. There was Google Videos back in the day, and that's before Google bought YouTube. So that's how far back this was. But I forget how I notified anyone, but did 2 debates in a Salafi mosque. One is, does the evidence show that Christianity is true? And 2, does the evidence show that Islam is true? And for the Christianity debate, there were a few Christians who showed up, but they left after the Christian debate was over, and so it was just me and a mosque full of Salafi Muslims doing the "Is Islam True" debate. And I remember I'm sitting there, talking about Muhammad and this and that, and in my conclusion, which apparently Cameron has a video, which I haven't seen this in years, but in my conclusion, I remember kind of looking up and thinking, okay, if they're going to do anything, if they're going to do something, they're going to do something. I might as well go out like a boss. And so I was like, hey, I encourage all of you to reject Muhammad as an obvious false prophet, and blah, blah. I just said it. And right in front of me in the mosque there was the son of the leader of the mosque, who was Sheikh Jalal Abu Rub. So it was Sheikh Jalal.
Rub.
Yeah, it was Sheikh Jalal Abu Rub's son was right in front of me, and he cracked up laughing when I said that in the mosque. I saw him go like this. So I'm go, and I was like, "Oh, this is funny." I love it when I make them laugh.
They had their characters back then, but this was actually better days for Dawah. People like Bassam Zawadi were certainly better representatives of Islam than the Muhammad Hijabs, Ali Dawas, and so forth. But the last time, you remember when Jake was doing the grading of Muslim apologists? I don't remember. I didn't see the video, but
I think he had Bassam at the top.
Well, I had asked him, because when I did a debate in Texas, he was there to debate Avery, and so I was talking to Jake at one point, and I said, you gave a lot of these guys some low rankings, I heard. I said, who would you rate at the top? And he mentioned Bassam, and I was thinking, wow, Bassam's been out of action for a while, so I was kind of curious how he ran across Bassam. But, maybe he's still active behind the scenes somewhere. But in any case, Bassam was as far as Muslims go, a pretty stand-up guy.
Mm-hmm. And he was cool. I think he came to my apartment in New York. What's that?
Yeah, I did around the same time you did, I think, because I was probably close to 20 years ago or something, or 18 years ago in Toronto. And I think it was also a Salafi mosque here. But he was, what I found about Bassam is he was quite, he knew his stuff, unlike, some of the other guys that just rambled on the same Dawah script. But he was a respectful individual, very strongly, very strong Saudi, very Salafi, and but I did find him to be a nice fellow overall.
And I just mentioned, I think he came to my apartment in New York, and we were hanging out because I remember afterwards I picked him up somewhere, I think in New Jersey. He was over there. I think we went to my apartment, hung out there for a little while, and then because we're doing a live debate on the Chris Arnson show. So we actually drove down there to Long Island. I lived in the Bronx. I picked him up in New Jersey. We drove down to be on Chris Arnson's show. But seemed pretty cool. He debated Nabil too back in the day. So yep. Yeah. Always wonder why he kind of disappeared, but we'll see.
Watch David's answer very carefully though, because his answer is basically this entire video.
As far as the reliability of the New Testament, he says, well, the Gospels are anonymous. We don't have any reason to believe that they were really by the apostles. I think we do. We have a list of the writers by Irenaeus. Who was Irenaeus? Irenaeus was a follower of Polycarp. Polycarp was a follower of the Apostle John. So would Irenaeus have been in a good position to know who wrote the Gospels? Well, if he knows a man who knew a man who wrote the last Gospel, I would say he is in a good position.
There it is. Asked to defend the Bible, David Wood calls a witness, a man named Irenaeus, a bishop from the late 2nd century who, as a young man, sat under Polycarp, who personally knew the Apostle John.
Let me pause here, because just saying Irenaeus, that wouldn't really be a full case for traditional authorship of like the Gospels and so on. Cameron was saying that these books are anonymous. They're anonymous. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'm only too sure that what he's about to do, the argument's going to be, you affirm, or at least don't deny, sola scriptura, and that's your operating principle, unless, I've heard you talk about this, you're persuaded otherwise kind of thing. And that, I know Tony and I are firmly committed to the principle of sola scriptura. The assumption's going to be, unless the Bible tells you that Luke wrote it, then you can't, within a Protestant sola scriptura paradigm, affirm Lucan authorship, which is just absurd. It doesn't touch sola scriptura at all. But it's even worse than that, as I'll point out, and I'm sure Tony will have much to say as well. But I'm pretty sure that's probably where he's going. And the mistake here would be to reduce the case for Lucan authorship to what you said in a few seconds.
Yeah.
In responding to Bassam, right?
Oh, yeah.
As if that's all that can be said.
And one second, Anthony. I want to point out why I was specifically pointing that out to Bassam. Bassam was the guy who would complain you don't have isnads for what you're saying. You don't have, I got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so. So since he's obsessed, anything I bring up, any source I quote, he goes, what's your isnad for that? Where you get, who got it from who got it from who got it from who got it from who? So I specifically brought up Irenaeus from Polycarp, from John, to say, oh, see, unbroken chain. This is what you guys are obsessed with. Not, oh, that's David Wood's case for the authorship of the Gospels or something like that. So anyway, that context is kind of important. David said this to a particular person who uses a particular historical method. David showed that, hey, I can apply your method that you use and say, hey, you've got Irenaeus, Polycarp, John there. So what's your problem here? What's your problem?
I think he said too much, Dave. Like, you'll notice he really packs in these arguments. He assumes a lot. You're going to hear it in the interview. I reviewed it earlier. But this idea that unless you know the authorship, then you can't really hold to that. I mean, we've got books in the Bible like the book of Judges. We don't know who wrote Judges, or 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles. We don't know who wrote Hebrews. And yet the church accepted those books, even if Hebrews took a while to accept. They still accepted it. And so I think he's in error in assuming that, well, you need to know who the authors are. And I think Anthony and I have already mentioned this, that the manuscripts that we have of the Gospels, they have the superscription, kata Mattheon, kata Markon, kata Lukon, and so forth, according to Matthew, according to Luke. This was common knowledge that was passed down. And so, I mean, again, we'll talk about this, but I mean, why not go to Ignatius? Ignatius of Antioch is much earlier than Irenaeus. He's he dies around 107 of AD, and he was a disciple of John as well. And he clearly quotes from Matthew, he quotes from John, he quotes from Luke, little references here and there, very vague to Mark, but and Ignatius didn't appeal to, oh, we know this is John, or oh, we know this is Matthew. He simply presumes that his audience is familiar with these texts. And so I just mentioned that because Ignatius is actually much earlier than Irenaeus.
Well, so we'll have a bunch to say on a lot of these things, but one thing I want to throw in before we go on is there's a common mistake that papists and orthos make when they mention a church father saying something, or when a Protestant refers to a church father saying something. They think that ipso facto, this is an affirmation of their view of tradition. First of all, the word tradition can mean a number of different things. Sometimes it's just talking about historical reportage, witnesses passing down information, the ordinary way that people know about historical matters, any historical matter, not just religious or sacred matters. But what I want to point out here is, just because Irenaeus, who was a disciple of Polycarp, a disciple of John, says something, doesn't mean that what Irenaeus is saying is something he's passing on as that which has been handed down to him from John through Polycarp. Because when you read Irenaeus's writings, the one thing you cannot escape is that this is a man committed to the scriptures and saturated with the scriptures, and he's making arguments from the scriptures. And so just saying Irenaeus here says this, therefore he's getting it from tradition, and if you're getting it from him, you're getting it from tradition. That's a whopper of an assumption, and it's outrageously false, at least in the vast majority of cases. There's only a handful of times where Irenaeus will actually say this is something that he got from the elders or something like that. And even in that case, it's not necessarily that he's saying these elders got it from somebody prior to them, so much as it might just as well be they too gleaned this from their own reading and interpretation of the scriptures. So there's a lot of stuff that people throw out and just assume and hope you will, and it's just fundamentally objectionable. It's terrible methodology.
Let's find out. Let's see where he's going with
So
this.
we've got a chain of custody. Irenaeus knew a man who knew a man. So being close to the facts makes a witness credible, according to David Wood. It's actually a really good principle, but hold on to it. And this wasn't a one-off. In the same debate, David Wood says this about all of the Gospels.
How do we know that the Gospels go back to eyewitnesses? Again, we have Irenaeus saying who wrote the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Who was Irenaeus? He was a disciple of Polycarp who knew the Apostle John and perhaps some of the other apostles. Papias was in complete agreement, and he was even earlier. He knew some of the apostles.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John on the word of Irenaeus. Remember that name, though, because this entire video is kind of secretly about him. But wait, is Irenaeus really the whole case? Surely there's like this mountain of patristic evidence, ancient sources, telling us who wrote Luke. Actually, there's a funny story. So a Cambridge New Testament scholar named Simon Gathercole, a Protestant, for the record, built a chart of every early source that attests who wrote each gospel. I'm going to put it on screen so we can look at the Luke column. Papias, nothing. Polycrates, nothing. Theophilus, Hegesippus, Apollinaris, nothing, nothing, nothing. It's a pretty quiet column. Before the year 200, there are exactly 2 check marks. 2. The first is something called the Muratorian Fragment, or earlier surviving list of Christian scriptures, roughly 160 to 200 AD. The second is Irenaeus, David Wood's witness. That's the entire ancient case for who wrote a quarter of the New Testament, a list maker and then one bishop. So
What perchance are you laughing at, Anthony?
He went to Simon Gathercole, and I can tell you already, he's not looking at the whole of Gathercole on this sort of issue, but he's reducing everything to this list that he gave, referring to Luke as the author of the gospel. The evidence for Lucan authorship is incredible. In fact, let me point out something that makes this altogether embarrassing. So here I have a printout. Everybody can pull it up. This is a printout of the Catholic Encyclopedia's entry on the Gospel of St. Luke. The Gospel of St. Luke. I'm not going to read everything in this article, obviously, but it has typically, what you would find in anything treating authorship, and this is especially found in Protestant commentaries, but one of the things that's done is the evidence for authorship is usually broken down into external and internal evidence. Now, here's what it says just on the internal evidence. And I would encourage everybody to go read it. I actually think it's a great article. The problem is it's a great article for what we would say and not as much for what Cameron would say. On the internal evidence, it says the internal evidence may be briefly summarized as follows. First, the author of Acts was a companion of St. Paul, namely St. Luke, and the author of Acts was the author of the gospel. But then it says this, with respect to that first proposition, the author of Acts was a companion of St. Paul, namely St. Luke. This is what it says. There is nothing more certain in biblical criticism than this proposition. They're talking about the internal evidence. I'm not even looking at the external evidence. The internal evidence. Now, he's going on the assumption that there isn't internal evidence. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I'm just pointing out here that if the case is reduced to one little thing that he's looking at from Simon Gathercole, I mean, yeah, that doesn't sound all that great, but that's hardly what it's reducible to. Again, we'll say a lot more, but I'd like to hear what Cameron says, but that's the Catholic Encyclopedia. You can assume that the Catholic Encyclopedia has, its druthers about it at least. They're not going to be conceding this kind of point, especially if such a powerful argument is available for arguing the necessity of accepting the Roman magisterium. Right? But anyways.
Let's see.
the next question asks pretty much itself, doesn't it? Like if everything rides on these 2 witnesses, Well, what else did they
Did
believe?
he just say everything right? So he's taking it for granted now that everything rides on these two witnesses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he says too much. It's a lot of it is ad hoc, David. I mean, he's going to push this all towards, well, the Roman Catholic Church is the true church. All roads lead back to Rome, and that's basically where he's going to lead us to. But like I said, he just there's a lot of assumptions he makes here that are yet to be proved.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, yeah, my sort of like first line of thinking would be along the lines of, how do I know Plato wrote the Republic? How do I know Aristotle wrote the Nicomachean Ethics? How do I know these things? I don't know. People were quoting it, and then when they in the copies, names on there and things like that, and I don't know.
Yeah,
People who take these books seriously and preserve them tend
Yeah.
to know who they're from and things like that. Anyway,
Yeah, since you mentioned that, let me throw in. So, first of all, just think about the absurdity of the book of Luke or any of the Gospels just randomly showing up on somebody's doorstep.
yep, church's
They
doorstep.
pick this up, and they say, we're going to commit our entire lives to this, and they have no idea where it came from. That's absurd. For one, think about how absurd it is, especially in the case of Luke's writings. Now, I know I'm saying Luke, but I'm going to supply evidence. We've already said some of it, but notice he's writing to a prominent Roman. He's addressing it to Theophilus. Both works are addressed to Theophilus. That's one of the reasons scholars recognize these two books belong to each other. They're part of a 2-volume work. Both are addressed to the same figure, most excellent Theophilus, which is a term used to refer to somebody in some kind of prominent office. But in the second book, Acts, it says, in my former treatise, O most excellent Theophilus. So he tells you he wrote a former treatise. This contributes to the conclusion that both are being written by the same figure. So think about it. Theophilus is getting this treatise, this 2-volume work, and he doesn't know who sent it to him, and he's just accepting this. Now, one of the things that, if you pick up scholarship on something like the purpose of Luke Acts, its original purpose, why was it written, and what was it sent out to accomplish? This question is not addressing in the final purpose of God, what is its long-term intention, but in terms of the immediate need or reason for it, what occasioned it, what at least some scholars will argue is that this is being prepared for the benefit of Paul as a kind of legal brief as he stands to await trial.
Pause that. I thought I invented that, and then I found other people saying that, right? And I was just basing it on, in Acts, when they addressed like the Roman governor and stuff, they would call him like most excellent so and so, and I was like, that's how Luke is referring to whoever he's sending this book. It looks like he's sending it to some sort of Roman authority on something, and it was just, okay, well, it ends with Paul getting to Rome where he's gonna have some sort of trial. It looks like, hey, you want all the details on everything Paul's been talking about and everything he's been doing for this trial. I've written it all out for you. Here it all is. That's just what I was like. Oh, I come up with this awesome theory, but yeah, it turned out other people thought of that too. It's funny. I thought I invented the design argument for God's existence. I thought I invented all kinds of things when I thought of them, and then I found out, oh, people have been saying this stuff for a long time.
Well, so the follow-up then to that is Theophilus is certainly going to know where this comes from. Just because a book is what we would, if we're going to be technical and nuanced, it's formally anonymous in the sense that in the body of the narrative of the gospel and then its sequel, the book of Acts, in the body of the narrative, the author doesn't name himself. He does refer to himself, but not by name, which is not uncommon in books of this sort. But in the ancient world, there was more than one way to skin a cat. There was more than one way. It's true today, too. There's more than one way for a person to indicate who the author is or for a person to know who the author is. I've illustrated this before using Bart Ehrman's book, How Jesus Became God, since Ehrman is the go-to skeptic of people like not just Muslims, but Catholics, apparently, right? First we're going to use the skeptics to cast doubt upon the Word of God so that then we can say you've got to believe in our Pope or our magisterium, right? That's the methodology. You get people off of their confidence in the Word of God so that you can then, they're okay with you believing the Bible in some way as long as it's only as filtered through them. But you've got to accept them in order to have this. But Ehrman's book, if you look at his book, How Jesus Became God, read the body of the book. You will not see a reference in the book to Ehrman. Now, imagine if I came to you and said, Bart Ehrman didn't write this book. You'd say, look, dummy, it's right there on the title page. It's right there on the front cover. Well, when the Gospels circulated, as far as we know, we have no evidence to the contrary. They always circulated with superscriptions on them. Now, some scholars will debate exactly when those superscriptions get put there, but all the evidence indicates that it was remarkably early. Remarkably early because, first of all, he mentioned, I don't remember the two people he showed from Gathercole's list, but when you look at somebody like Clement of Alexandria or Irenaeus or the Moratorian Canon, he mentioned the Moratorian Canon, I recall that, in those pieces that make reference to the gospel as the Gospel of Luke, they actually refer to it along the lines of according to Luke, kata Lukon, or euangelion kata Lukon. That's significant because that's not just a way of indicating this was written by Luke. They're actually quoting the superscription that appears on the Gospels. And if they're quoting that superscription, then it shows the superscription predates them. The superscription isn't being originated by Irenaeus or Clement of Alexandria or the Moratorian Canon. They're assuming that as already a known title. It's understood by people. And so they're just speaking from common knowledge. And so just like any copy of the gospel necessarily is evidence for its antecedent, and most people believe that, that our copies are several generations removed from the original. They don't think we have the originals. We have copies from the copies from the copies, which means that when you have the Moratorian Canon referring to and Clement and Irenaeus, a title on the manuscripts, it points back to a much earlier date because these titles are on all the manuscripts for which we have the first page. And in fact, we even have subscriptions. And what makes this even worse is when you look at translations of the Bible into ancient languages. If you look at the Syriac, if you look at the Latin, the superscriptions are already there. And so my point is, these are remarkably early, they're widespread, and they're unchallenged. They're universal. There's not in fact, not only is there no church father, no manuscript, no translation, nothing that points against Lucan authorship, and everything points to it, not even heretics like Marcion or Porphyry or Celsus. None of them questioned Lucan authorship. Everybody took it as a given. It was so firmly established. So to pretend that the case for Lucan authorship, and here he's just talking about external evidence, I haven't even gotten to some of the internal stuff, but when it comes to the external evidence, the evidence points to the fact that Luke wrote this and that it goes back to the very beginning, it's widespread, and it's unchallenged. There's no good reason to play skeptic along with Bart Ehrman, unless, of course, you've got an agenda, which is believe in my Pope, who will then tell you to believe in, almsgiving. I mean, I don't know, whatever it is you want to say other people need to believe along with you.
Yeah, this book here, guys, I'm sure you've seen this before, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses by Richard Bauckham. It's a very good book related to our question, and it's the subtitle is The Gospels as Eyewitness Testimony. And so Bauckham covers what we've just discussed as well, but a lot more stuff in there. But Anthony is absolutely right. I like what he said about Marcion, because here you have this heretic, the second century heretic who threw all the other gospels out the window, including the Old Testament, because he was a Gnostic. But he affirmed the Gospel of Luke, and there's no indication at all that there was any doubt about that gospel or any dispute. So Cameron's whole argument here is he's operating under the idea of sola ecclesia, that you need the church and the church alone to determine what is scripture, what is not, and what is in the canon. So as I said, I think he is saying he's trying to pack so much into this, so unnecessarily, because he has an agenda, and that agenda, I think you'll notice at the end, is to say you need the Roman Catholic Church.
No, we need the Eastern Orthodox Church.
And
they don't even have an official canon.
Yeah.
Let me underscore something.
Sorry, Anthony.
I just want to say real. Oh, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just going to quickly say
Tony, you go. Okay.
Which team? Yeah, it's like spy versus spy. I was just going to say that. Just on a different topic, this is the same guy who said we have more evidence for the Marian apparitions at Zaytun in Egypt than we have with the resurrection accounts in the New Testament. So just factor that in, that there's, in his mind, those images, those apparitions of Mary in Zaytun, Egypt, he says is based on stronger eyewitness testimony than what we find in the New Testament Gospels regarding the resurrection of Jesus. So, yeah.
I just want to add a quick point about Marcion. So I made the observation that Marcion, a early heretic, so he's in the second century, mid-second century. A lot of early writers are responding to Marcion. You've got Tertullian, Justin Martyr, other people responding to him. So he was an early heretic. And he is deliberately rejecting these other gospels, which shows, of course, that he's aware of them. But here's the interesting thing. He's not just retaining Luke and therefore showing his affirmation of Lucan authorship. When he rejected Matthew, Mark, and John, he didn't deny that Matthew, Mark, and John wrote those. He actually thought they did. He just said they were apostates, and Luke was the only one who wasn't. So, I mean, this is huge. Like, the evidence is so strong that here's this heretic that's got an axe to grind. He's got a bias. He wants people to listen to him. And so he's going to axe these other gospels, but he doesn't have the temerity to go the route of Cameron and other skeptics and say, we don't know who wrote these things unless you listen to a pope. He knows these things were written by Matthew, Mark, and John. And so doesn't even try that. He just says, you can't trust these guys.
As far as Matthew doesn't say how Matthew was sent to a church or whatever. It doesn't say how it went out. That's the point. It doesn't say. But we do get an idea from other parts of the New Testament how these things were sent out, because the letters of Paul, and he would send a representative or sometimes multiple representatives of him who knew him, and he would send them to the church with the letter that he was sending them. So they know where it's coming from. So going back to what Anthony was saying, the idea that the gospel of a gospel shows up on your front doorstep or something like that, you don't know where it's coming from. We have no reason to think that that's how things were going. And so if you wanted to take seriously the hypothesis that other people wrote the Gospels and it wasn't Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it's like, okay, so originally it would have been someone, they bring it. This is the Gospel according to Bob. Bob sent this. And then somehow just everyone universally agrees that it's that it's Matthew or that it's Mark and stuff like that. Anyway, that all seems kind of absurd. That sort of reasoning seems kind of absurd. Makes more. All the evidence is pointing in one direction with the Gospels as far as their authorship and so on. So you need a really good reason to say someone else wrote them, or that as a Protestant, unless you grant the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, you don't know who wrote any of this stuff. Sounds weird. If you believe that the Roman Catholic Church had good evidence that they based these things on, then great. Anyone, even people who aren't Roman Catholic, could agree with that evidence. That would be kind of my perspective. But maybe Cameron's about to change my mind and blow my mind.
Yeah, with just to come back to Ignatius, David, Ignatius, his dates are 35 to 107, and he's very, very early. And when he quotes from the Gospels, he won't even say which Gospel he's quoting from, but he assumes the presumption is that his audience, and he wrote to a number of churches as he was on his way to martyrdom. And, for example, he would say, as the scripture says, be wise as serpents in all things and harmless as doves. And again, you could find that in the Gospel of Matthew. And he would make references to, for example, the Gospel of John. He would speak of Jesus being the door of the Father. And he would speak of Jesus even predicting not only his own resurrection, but that he truly would raise himself from the dead, which shows knowledge of John 2:18 to 22, where Jesus says, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again. And so when you look at that very early document, and he's quoting these passages, the presumption is that the churches that are reading his letters are familiar with these passages. What Jesus says, for example, Ignatius was a very strong defender of the corporeality of Christ against the Gnostics. And he says, for example, he quotes where Jesus says, handle me and see, I'm not a spirit without a body. I mean, that's right from Luke 24, verse 39. So right there, you have this early writer, much earlier than Irenaeus, already quoting from the Gospel of Luke. And again, he's not just grabbing these passages out of the air. There's a presumption on the part of Ignatius that his hearers and readers are familiar with these texts. Just like I would say, God so loved the world that he gave his only son. I think most Christians would be aware that, yeah, that's John 3:16. Are you muted, David?
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Some of these super chats are actually responding to certain things, so zoom through these super chats to get to the ones that are actually on point. When Catholics do this, y'all don't call them Cathobro, but when Orthodox do it, you call them Orthobro. Weird. No, I didn't invent Orthobro or come up with that name. That's what they call themselves, and they're a particular group that behave like a cult. Catholics have something similar, the Groypers. And when someone's a Groyper, we call them Groyper.
Yeah.
But notice, I'm not. I don't call a normally functioning Eastern Orthodox Christian an orthobro if he brings up the canon or uses an argument like this. I refer to orthobros as a particular group of people. I'm not aware of Cameron being part of some group with cult-like behavior that goes out and I'm not. Cameron seems like a Catholic who wants people to believe in Catholicism and wants to give an argument for Catholicism. Guess what? I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with Cameron doing that. I don't have a problem with an Eastern Orthodox Christian doing that. I don't have a problem with that. So yeah, why would I call them Cathobros? Cathobros. If Cameron and some others end up with orthobro-like behavior where they're just constantly harassing, and guys, I hope you understand that it's kind of in jest when at the beginning I'm like, oh yeah, so they run into the defense of Islam. The orthobros are actually doing that. I was just messing with Cameron a little bit, but yeah, guys, when someone's presenting a serious argument, I'm still wondering why you directed it at me. There are tons of people who regularly argue this stuff. Why would you not direct it towards them? But at the end of the day, I'm not lumping you together with people who just constantly run defense for Islam. There are certain groups that do that, and it's really weird, and it seems demonic. But no, I'm not putting Cameron's not in that category, guys. In other words,
David distanced him from the orthos defending the Muslims, but I want to underscore the capitulation to skeptics like Ehrman and other garden variety pagans and unbelievers, because essentially the methodology here is we're going to use all this material and dump it at your feet in attacking the New Testament's credibility so that you feel the need to direct your sight, your faith somewhere else if you want to hold on to these documents at all.
Yeah.
To
No,
me,
that's a problem.
so Augustine said a long time ago, he said, if you believe what you like in the gospel and disbelieve what you don't like, it's not the gospel you believe, it's yourself. And I think the same principle's true here. If you're basically saying you can't trust God's word, you can't found your faith upon its deliverances, the word of the apostles, unless you come over here and kiss the Pope's ring, then in effect he's telling you that's where your faith has to be.
It has to be.
And that's, problematic. So, but I wouldn't put him in the same category as Oath of Rose either. But I do think there's a good bit to criticize in all this.
Oh, there is, and yeah, I'm thinking along the same lines. I have to believe everything this church affirms or this authority affirms or something like that, or I can't believe in the gospel. I believe in them. I have to believe in them first. Why would I believe in them? Why would I believe in them? It reminds me of it's a completely different situation, but it reminds me of Muslims when they tell you, hey, believe in Islam, and you bring up some criticism. Oh, I got this issue, and they go, oh, no, you can't understand the Quran unless you read it in Arabic. And I go, wait a minute. So what am I supposed to do if I can't understand it? How am I supposed to believe in it? Oh, you just have to believe our scholars. Okay, so now I have to go to your scholars, but which scholars? Sunni, Shia, which scholars? Which scholars do I go to? I would have to know and understand what your text says so that I see which group represents it most accurately, and then I trust that. But I would have to understand and know what your text says before I know who to listen to speak about it, right? Otherwise, it's just eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I'm going with you. Well, similarly, if I want to know, hey, should I be going with the Catholic Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church or this church or that church, who's representing it accurately, I would have to know what they correspond to, who is the best reflection of the scriptures. But instead, they're saying, no, believe my church first, and then you can believe in the scriptures and all these other things. And it's like, well, how do I know I should believe in your church then? What possible basis could I have for believing in your church apart from you saying it? But I mean, if it's not going to be eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I would kind of have to know and believe in the scriptures, which I'm not allowed to believe in until I already affirm your church. Okay, well, I guess I have to do the eeny, meeny, miny, mo thing. But let's see. Maybe it's got, oh, wait, we're reading Super Chats real quick.
Yeah, one other thing on the end of that is if you were to ask a Roman Catholic what is the basis for believing in the infallibility of the Pope, the papal office, all that comes with it, as well as the authority of the magisterium, or in their parlance, the church. So the magisterium is the church. They would point you to a text like Matthew 16. But notice the circularity here. You can't know what the scripture is apart from our infallible authority. Well, what's our basis for believing in your infallible authority? Oh, well, it's this passage over here in scripture. Well, who says that's scripture? I do. Who says it means that? I do. It's entirely circular. Now they'll say it isn't. They'll say, oh, this is a historical appeal, right? We're appealing to something like Matthew's gospel on the grounds of its historical credibility, and they would give a bunch of historical arguments. Well, how's that anything different than what they're claiming is the only recourse of a Protestant? They would say, at best, all we have for our particular positions are historical or evidential type arguments and not arguments from infallible authority. But my point here is not to get into all that. I'm just saying the only way they'll attack Protestantism on the grounds that it doesn't have, let's say, a infallible declaration on the canon. That's their claim. You don't have an infallible authority telling you what the canon is. You have to base this on the basis of historical investigation and all its vagaries and questions and so forth. And so it's potentially a fallible conclusion that you've arrived at. Well, then when we turn around and ask them what's their basis for asserting the infallibility of Rome and its magisterium, they point back to the scriptures. And then in order to say, oh, this is not circular because we're not claiming to appeal to the Bible as an infallible authority to prove our infallible authority, which proves the infallible authority of the Bible, we're treating the Bible like a historical document that's basically reliable, right? That's the fallback, which is what they're criticizing Protestants for. I don't think that's all that Protestants have at their disposal. But why? Who are you to criticize this is a form of argumentation when it's your form of argumentation? Talk about a dilemma. Here's the Catholic dilemma.
Yeah. So now we've got equivocation and circularity.
Yep.
You're doing a bang up job there, Cameron.
Yeah.
Then we have D.
And
Wood.
also,
Okay.
you may not know this, guys, but the Roman Catholic Church has infallibly interpreted only 6 passages in the New Testament. One of them is the one Anthony mentioned, Matthew 16. And so the remainder of the Bible is not infallibly interpreted, which means all these Roman Catholics are exercising private interpretation on what those passages mean. So there is a circularity there. But at the end of the day, the buck stops at the church. The church is it's the one that gives you the scriptures, the one that defines the parameters of the scriptures and the canon and so on. So the whole argument is based on authority, and his authority again is soli ecclesia. That's the basis of his whole argument.
And remember, folks, when we say church in this context, we're talking about Rome saying the church decides this. It doesn't mean church in the common New Testament sense, the body of the faithful. It means certain figures who have arrogated to themselves a certain hierarchical standing and authority and said everything must, come to us. So we're not using the church in this same way. I mean, the Bible will use it in a variety of ways. Sometimes it refers to the local church. Sometimes it's speaking universally. But when Rome uses it, it almost always refers to the magisterium.
We have D. Wood. D. Wood could chose not to respond to an attention seeker and actually finish his studio. No, I poured over half a gallon of epoxy resin. It was quick dry. It said 24 hours, so I thought that would be good. And then I found out, no, before you stand this upright, you have to wait 5 to 7 days so that it completely hardens. And so I got nothing to do but wait for that to dry for my background. So I can respond to whoever I want. I remember the first time I learned about Catholics as a child, listening to the Apostles' Creed. The next Sunday raised a few questions, lol. Yeah, Catholic. I don't know.
Hey, did that say Segura? That's one of your relatives.
I know.
Is it Segura or Segara?
Segara. I don't know about any of you, but I'd rather be little c Catholic, Protestant, and little o Orthodox, still Protestant, rather than being big C or big O. Yeah, because you put CO to get together. What do you get? CO. Correctional officer.
Right.
Correctional officers.
Yeah. Oh, correctional officer. I thought it was.
Or Candace Owens. Cam's dilemma was developed by his friend Cesar Bernstein and strongly refuted by Dr. Christopher Clues, a.k.a. Protestant philosopher. Interesting.
He's
and
actually
yet he's
got a
still
good channel.
using it.
I haven't seen that channel. I mean, I haven't seen the video that he's referring to, but that channel's a good channel, the Protestant philosopher. Good stuff over there.
As a Tony myself, I appreciate all of your work, Tony. Yeah, David and Tony are pretty all right, too. Catholic dilemma. Either infallible authorities need interpreters or they don't. If they do, Protestants can interpret the papacy false. If they don't, the canon reduces to evidentialism. Either way, read the Church Fathers.
So what I was just saying a moment ago about an evidential case for the acceptance or reliability of the New Testament writings, I don't reduce it to that, but I do revel in it. There is a rich evidential case for the books of the New Testament. And I got to tell you, my Roman Catholic friends, I'd much rather have that than the say-so of a pope. Got to be honest with you. Don't trust any of those guys as far as I can throw them. Anybody who tells me that I should doubt these writings apart from them already calls their own authority into question. Anybody who can't hear the voice of the serpent behind that, you need new ears. But it's not reduced to that. And I'm going to say something about it in a bit, but at the same time, it's incredibly robust. The historical evidential case for the reliability of the Gospels, all 4 of them, is incredibly robust. In fact, let me read this. I didn't read this earlier, but this is from the Catholic Encyclopedia on the canon of the New Testament. It says, from the testimony of St. Irenaeus alone, there can be no reasonable doubt that the canon of the gospel was inalterably fixed in the Catholic Church by the last quarter of the 2nd century. Now, it doesn't end there, but notice this. It's saying from that alone, it's the evidence from Irenaeus is such, because he's not, when you read Irenaeus and you realize what he's doing, he's not arguing for the acceptance of these books. He's arguing something from the fact of their universal acceptance. So he's an early figure, and he's talking about these books as already established throughout the world. So that's an incredible bit of evidence. But then it goes on to say, the Didache, or teaching of the apostles, an uncanonical work dating from circa 110, implies that the gospel, it puts the word gospel in quotes here, indicating the fourfold gospel. In other words, Christians early on didn't refer to gospels only. They also just referred to the four as the gospel. It was the fourfold gospel. This is where Muhammad later gets the idea of referring to the books that Christians have as the gospel. He's not referring to, I mean, at least insofar as he's talking about what Christians possess. What Christians possessed were four gospels, but he keeps calling it the gospel because that's the way Christians referred to their literature all the time. But here's what it says. The Didache, an uncanonical work dating from circa 110, implies that the gospel was already a well-known and definite collection. Already by 110. Notice that. Then it goes on, it gets even better. Same article, Canon of the New Testament. It says, from the days touching on those of the last apostles, there were two well-defined bodies of sacred writings of the New Testament, which constitute the firm, irreducible, universal minimum and the nucleus of its complete canon. These were the four Gospels, as the Church now has them, and 13 epistles of St. Paul. So this quote throws in the epistles of Paul to boot. I won't go on to talk about the others, but notice it says these two collections, the four Gospels and the writings of Paul, were already established in the Church at the time before the last of the apostles died. This is the Catholic Encyclopedia saying that. Now, I'm skipping over all of the argumentation that goes into this, but that's why I encouraged people before to read. I encouraged them to read the one on Luke, the Gospel of Luke. I think it's very well done. But also go and read the entry on the canon of Scripture, because in that entry, it's not just making claims, it's giving you supporting evidence for it. And the case is incredibly more robust than what you just heard from Cameron, as allegedly all that we get from. So. Yeah. And I won't go over other quotes, but there's more in that article. It's I think they're both really well done.
Yeah, you already see that internal evidence as well in the New Testament. 2 Peter 3:16, where Peter already refers to Paul's letters as scripture. He says the unstable distort Paul's letters as they do the other scriptures. And then 1 Timothy 5:18, Paul quotes from Deuteronomy, do not muzzle the ox when it treads out the grain. And then he quotes, for the laborer is worthy of his hire, which is a quote from Luke 10, verse 7, the Gospel of Luke. So it seems that the Pauline corpus seems to be already intact, at least according to 2 Peter 3:16. And Luke, for sure, seems to be already there towards the end, nearing Paul's martyrdom. It's already there. So that encyclopedia entry, I think, reflects what we're already seeing in the internal evidence of the New Testament, for sure. And of course, Ignatius, you mentioned the Didache, Anthony. And the Didache and Ignatius, they're about the same time. And clearly, I mean, even Irenaeus, he even talks about why there are four. And then he talks about the four cardinal points, the north, the south, the west, the east. And so this idea that there was a fourfold gospel, I think is already well established long before Irenaeus.
Oh, I do have to read this quote real quick because it goes with this, but I forgot just how poignant this is. Listen to this. It says, this is in the entry on the canon of the New Testament, the Catholic Encyclopedia. Thus, the patristic testimonies have brought us step by step to a divine, inviolable fourfold gospel existing in the closing years of the apostolic era. Just how the tetramorph, the fourfold gospel, was welded into a unity and given to the church is a matter of conjecture. But, and here's the thing I really want to point out, As Zahn observes, there is good reason to believe that the tradition handed down by Papias of the approval of St. Mark's Gospel by St. John reveals that either the latter himself or a college of his disciples added the fourth Gospel to the Synoptics and made the group into the compact and unalterable Gospel, the one in four, whose existence and authority left their clear impress upon all subsequent ecclesiastical literature, and then later find their conscious formulation in the language of Irenaeus. Here's why I want to point that out. There's a great book written by Protestant scholar Charles Hill called Who Wrote the Gospels? He does an excellent job of going through doing just this really great detective work and showing how by steps you are led right back to what looks like the feet of John as the one who kind of finally compiled all the books of the New Testament, some of which were already circulating together as distinct collections, like the Gospels. You ever thought about, like, if you look at the manuscript evidence, even though Luke wrote also the book of Acts, a lot of our evidence, I mean, most of it, as far as I know, I can't think of an exception, but there might be. But what we know is that Luke circulated with Matthew, Mark, and John as part of the fourfold gospel. And that's just strikingly early. And they're being circulated in the Codex. So early on, Christians and scholars puzzle over this. Where does this come from? They adopted the Codex format. It used to be that people wrote on scrolls. This was more cumbersome. You couldn't easily navigate it and get from one spot to another. You couldn't put more than a couple of books together if they were any comparable size. So the Codex was a radical innovation, and it allowed for putting a bunch of books together and easily flipping through it. Well, when you look at these codices, you have codices of the four Gospels, you have codices of the Pauline epistles circulating, you have Johannine writings circulating like this. So they're already circulating as distinct units. And so the question is, at what point did they get brought together? Because they do. And to all appearances, it looks like one figure is responsible for this, or at least a group of figures early on. And part of the evidence, I'll be quick here, but there's another scholar named Trobisch. He points out that on our manuscripts, you have paratextual features. Like I mentioned the Catholic Encyclopedia. Obviously, the contributors to the Catholic Encyclopedia, they're writing their own article, but somebody else is putting these all together. And then, they might say at the end of an entry, if you want to read more about this topic, go here, this topic, go there. That's something the editor is doing at the end of the process. He might put headers on each section. He might put numbers on the pages, right? These are all paratextual features. Well, when you look at the manuscripts of the Gospels, they have paratextual features all across the tradition. And the question is, how do you account for this when our manuscripts are being copied and circulated remarkably early, and yet they tend to have these paratextual features, like, for example, the Nomina Sacra. Nomina Sacra is when they would write any of the divine names that occur frequently, like Father, Son, or Spirit. They would abbreviate them for the sake of, speed of reference. There's other reasons they might do that. But you find this practice throughout the manuscript tradition. Do all these, is it like there's a scribe that's copying in one place and a scribe copying in another place, and they all independently decide we're gonna abbreviate these divine names? No. So what this sort of thing suggests, and there's a whole host of things like this, what this suggests to scholars is that very early on, these books that were already circulating as discrete units were eventually compiled together by some early figure of some stature and prominence, and the most likely figure that they all point to is the Apostle John, or that many point to.
Mm-hmm.
Here we have Protestants aren't allowed to respond with our beliefs without being mocked. People seem to think that Protestants just spawned out of nowhere after the Reformation. Well, that's where they came from. The early church was Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant. It was universal, it held to the faith, and it protested against the Pharisees. Irenaeus of Lyon famously claimed Jesus was 50 at crucifixion. Will he agree or disagree with Irenaeus's authority on this? God bless. Well, yeah, if you take...
he actually brings it up, David. He brings that up. You'll notice later, because I reviewed the video. he does bring that up, and he tries to kind of try to dismiss it. But I mean, it's something we need to really tackle, because when Irenaeus mentions that Jesus was 50 years old, he actually claims that he got that from apostolic tradition. And so it's one of the first places where you find this reference to the apostles, getting information from the apostles. And of course, I don't know any Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Protestant scholar who believes that Jesus was 50 years old when he was crucified. But then again, Irenaeus, I mean, they all say, yeah, he was wrong, but he claims he got that from the apostles. That's the troubling part, and yet we know that Jesus was not 50 years old when he died.
Yeah, and I don't know if Cameron's going to do this. We're about to find out, but it is this disturbing, like, for people who use the kind of all or nothing reasoning, like if you
Yeah.
accept anything from this person, you have to accept everything the person said, or if you reject something this person said, you have to treat him as completely unreliable. I hope Cameron's not going in that direction, but yeah, for everyone who's watching, we are completely allowed to say, hey, what Irenaeus is saying here is some evidence. It qualifies as some evidence for whatever he's saying. It's some level of evidence. But you look at that evidence and you say, oh, this lines up with this other piece of evidence and this other source and this other detail, and so it lines up, and so it makes him more believable on this point. If he says something and you say, okay, that's some evidence. Guess what? Him saying that Jesus was 50 and that he got it from the tradition of the apostles, that would be some evidence. It just wouldn't line up with everything else we know, and so you'd say, okay, well, that evidence has kind of been drowned out by other evidence and so on. But yeah, we'll see where he goes with this. Scripture, is that the debate? Fine. It is godly inspired writing from those selected by the Lord. Prophets are apostles. Our Old Testament was settled before Christ. New Testament written by the apostles and traded around the early churches. You guys look like three guys from an old school band reviewing auditions for a drummer for the latest tour. In the end, you'd inevitably go for Issa. I was saying, like, we're checking out Cameron to see if he's going to be our new drummer, but we're going to go with Issa. To the two Tonys, is it a fair argument against the veneration of saints to bring up the golden calf? Israel didn't worship the calf. They worshiped God through the image. It was still forbidden.
Yeah, this has to do with the categories of worship and veneration, and so the argument sometimes Protestants make is that, well, as long as they venerated the calf as an image of Yahweh, that it spoke of Yahweh's power and strength, then if it was veneration, then why was Moses all his nose was out of joint? Well, because those categories of worship and veneration are not in the Bible. The Bible clearly sees any act of prayer or devotion in a religious context to anything other than Yahweh as idolatry. And so when you hear Roman Catholics say, well, or Eastern Orthodox, we don't pray to Mary. I mean, we don't worship Mary. We venerate her and we give her hyperdulia. And they do that by prayer, by hymns, by invocation. Those are all expressions of worship. And so when they say things like, well, if you bow before a king, are you worshiping the king? Well, the context there is not religious. It's political. That's a completely different context. Or if I kiss a picture of my wife, what's the difference between that and kissing an icon of Christ? Well, kissing a picture of your wife is not a religious duty. It's a romantic love relationship you have with your spouse. That is not a religious context where you're rendering worship to a superior being. And so I think that's probably where our questioner is going. If you want to add to that, Tony, Anthony.
Well,
I
I was going to say something about the picture thing. So if somebody
Yeah.
kisses a picture of their wife,
Yeah.
that doesn't have any effect on the wife, right? You don't have any absurd thought in your head like the affection that I'm showing to this picture is passing to my wife, so that your
Right.
wife is over there suddenly feeling like a wet one planted on her cheek or something like that. I mean, it's just stupid. I don't understand why they say these sorts of things, because they're impressed by it, right? And they say this all the time. I've seen, there's one Eastern Orthodox guy that never tires of pointing out if people have any pictures in their house. Or he points out how some people will have action figurines or a stuffed animal or something like that. And he thinks that he's justifying the practice of icon veneration, in which they're performing acts of religious devotion that they believe somehow pass through them to that which they stand for. Well, first of all, I don't know, maybe there's some kooks out there who think that their little Star Wars action figures actually do represent real beings behind them or something. I don't know.
Vocab Malone.
But anyways, when you kiss a picture of your wife, it's more of a sentimental gesture on your part, but your wife's not in the next town over saying, "Oh, my husband loves me," or something. Just nothing's happening. Just so you know.
I got everyone throwing hands in the chat. Like and subscribe. That is good sound advice. Dr. Wood, please allow the poodle. It's too cute. That is the actual dumbest dog I've ever encountered in my entire life. D. Wood, you should make a video stream about personality disorders with traits to look out for and popular level examples. I do think that's something that's extremely important. I think there'd be other people who'd be better equipped for that, like an actual psychologist or something. With that said, I've been saying this for years because I grew up with they wouldn't have labeled it antisocial personality disorder until you turned 18. If it's a minor, if they had tested me or something like that, they would have diagnosed me with conduct disorder. But the point is, if you don't know that that you actually have a problem and that this is a diagnosable problem, and you're just sort of figuring things out on your own, you come to wrong conclusions. In other words, people growing up with the symptoms of antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder and so on, it would be very, very helpful if they learned that that's actually a problem before it screws up not only their lives, but the lives of lots of other people around them. So my view is that this should kind of be taught in schools. Like, guys, if you ever notice some of this in your life, you might want to go get checked out. It can save a lot. So anyway, I'd rather someone else do it, but if no one else wants to do it, I would do it. Guys, did you know we have Christian sources from Century Zero? We actually have the direct writings of Polycarp's mentor. Sorry, just joined this. Come out of nowhere, are y'all? Yo, this is when I was like, hey, let's pause this and go through the super chats. This is the super chat I saw, and I was like, oh, I need to answer this. Sorry, just joined. Did this come out of nowhere? Are y'all in good terms still? Why he target you specifically? To be clear, I don't think this is Cameron going, I have to declare war on David Wood, and now we got beef and stuff like that. I think Cameron wants to get this argument out there to convince people that they need to take a closer look at the Catholic Church, and that they'll find out that they do need the Catholic Church. And he put my name on it just because I'm on YouTube and hoping that I would see it and interact with it or something like that, something along those lines. So yes, I don't know that we're on terrible terms or something like that. The most differentiating factor between the Catholics and us Protestants is the knees of Catholics are much rounder and more worn down. No comment there. The Protestant equivalent of orthobros is wingalings. That's a good point. And I do criticize wingalings as a group. And when a wingaling, I say wingaling. So Catholics are wrong to say that Protestants believe work is not mandatory for salvation. The very reason early Protestants broke away from Rome was because Catholics were perceived to fall into idolatry. We got to talk to AP. AP says no. The Orthodox Church only believes everything is by grace through faith. Please inform. Please.
Oh, it's actually Cameron.
Hey, it's Cameron. Oh, I didn't even notice. Hey, it's Cameron.
Yeah.
He says, please inform Anthony. Hey, Anthony. Anthony. I don't even know what he's about to say. But Anthony, you need to listen to this, man. Please inform Anthony. Hey, Anthony, you need to know the Catholic Encyclopedia is not authoritative or magisterial. Tell him to give arguments. Yeah, Anthony, because you were quoting it. You were quoting it as the infallible doctrine of the Catholic Church, not as a good article written for the Catholic Encyclopedia that has a lot of stuff that we would agree with.
This is Cameron off the cuff, right? He's not as polished as his videos, so you can't expect the argument to even appear even superficially good at this point. So he says, inform Anthony, the Catholic Encyclopedia is not authoritative or magisterial. First of all, no such claim was made. Neither is that an assumption of any of my argumentation or my comments. But third, let's just point out the obvious. The Catholic Encyclopedia certainly, to me at least, I don't know about other Catholics out there, but got to be honest with you, it holds greater weight in representing to me what Rome's position is on things than a YouTube video by a guy who became Catholic after first finding out from Catholics he didn't understand his Protestant faith and then fell for Catholicism. The Catholic Encyclopedia is a work of top-notch Catholic scholars. I'm not just going to dismiss that. But like I said, I told people to go read the article and see that there's a great deal of argumentation that's behind these conclusions. This is a video in which we're making certain observations, can't say everything. But besides that, I've engaged in all kinds of argumentation and evidence. I point out that our superscriptions on our gospel manuscripts, whenever we find them, not every manuscript that we have contains the first page or the last page, but it's just across the board, the superscriptions bear witness to these authors. They bear witness to it unanimously. They bear witness to it throughout the world, wherever they're found. It's borne witness to in the translations, even into ancient languages like Syriac, the Syriac Peshitta, in the Latin manuscripts. This is the same thing that's seen across the board in patristic comments. And besides that, I haven't even gotten to any of the internal stuff, but I made the point a moment ago that just because somebody's a disciple of somebody who's a disciple of the disciples, like Irenaeus of Polycarp of John, doesn't mean that everything they say can just be put into the tradition category. Nobody who reads Irenaeus can possibly come away from that thinking that all they've been given is a bunch of traditions. They're given arguments from the scriptures. They're being given exegetical reasons for believing certain things. When you read the early church fathers commenting on Luke, one of the interesting things to observe is they actually believe there is internal evidence for Lucan authorship. I haven't even come to that yet, but certainly what I've said so far is not reducible to pretending that the Catholic Encyclopedia is magisterial. But by the way, what magisterial pronouncement is it that Irenaeus based his belief in Luke on? Was it the Council of Trent? Obviously not. Right? Was it,
unless he was a time traveler,
the council? Yeah, was it Council of Florence, the Council of Trullo, the Quinisext Council? I mean, what council was it that Irenaeus was looking to for his conviction that he said was spread throughout the world that this was written by Luke? He wasn't basing this on the deliverance of any council or any papal pronouncement.
But Cameron, thank you for the super chat and funding non-Catholic channels. That's all very ecumenical of you, buddy. Very ecumenical.
Make it more next time.
Yeah. All right, and here we have Tucker equals Marcion. That's not far off. All right, back to Cameron. Long diversion there, but here we go.
Let's start with the fragment, and we'll do it quickly because Witness 2 is the main event here. At one point, the fragment's author explains why a popular book of the day, The Shepherd of Hermas, shouldn't be read in church. It's too recent. And watch how he proves that it is recent. But Hermas wrote The Shepherd very recently, in our times, in the city of Rome, while Bishop Pius, his brother, was occupying the chair, cathedra, of the church of the city of Rome. So in passing, while dating a book, our earliest witness for Luke's authorship just told us the Church of Rome had a chair, one seat, one bishop. He names the man sitting on it, Pius, around the year 140. And in our times in the city of Rome is how scholars figure out where this anonymous author actually lived. Even J.B. Lightfoot, one of the greatest Protestant scholars who ever lived, said the word chair here points to a more or less prolonged existence of episcopacy in Rome, meaning Pius wasn't the first, meaning the chair was already old. So witness number 1 is a Roman Christian who casually remembers a bishop of Rome on his chair. Small world.
Yeah.
Now let's
Hey,
get
here,
to
David.
Irenaeus.
So, okay, there's a bishop of Rome. I mean, there was the Pentarchy. It was not just the bishop of Rome. There was the bishop of Antioch, bishop of Jerusalem, bishop of Constantinople, bishop of Alexandria. And the bishop of Rome was called first among equals because of the dignity of Rome as the capital of the empire, and also the belief that Paul and Peter died there. But what you're going to see is Cameron's going to start now. Notice he's now talking about the chair. Now he's going to go into this whole argumentation of the papacy and how we have proof that there was a papal representative, a papal individual on that seat. And at this stage, Irenaeus would have had no clue whatsoever that there was some bishop of Rome who was the supreme pontiff over all the other sees, etc. None of this is circulating in the time of Irenaeus. And so contextually speaking and historically speaking, of course, they look to Rome as a first among equals, but not as supreme pontiff over the whole church. That doesn't come until at least 400 years or so after Irenaeus. That's when you get Pope Leo the Great coming out and declaring himself to be the successor of Peter and the supreme governor over the whole church.
So are you basically suggesting that it's similar to that Cameron here is doing something similar to when we were just a couple days ago, we were watching something by Jay Dyer, and he would say, oh, we have councils. Oh, look, there's the council in Acts 15. Look, they've got a council. They had leaders there. We do this. Therefore, we're the ones who are following this. When he's basically reading how they do things back into that when it wasn't how they were doing things, and so it's kind of him saying, "Oh, look, there's a leader in Rome, but that's what we believe. We believe that. Oh, that's so. Now we've got the Pope, and everyone would have to look at that and go, you need to submit to the Pope. The evidence for the Pope is really early and overwhelming, and therefore you all need to be Roman Catholics."
That's where he's going to head.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, so. Also, let me throw in, this is funny because I haven't heard this, and I just heard this just now, and I remember because I've been doing a bunch of writing that I haven't released but plan to at some point, but in Trent Horn's book, The Case for Catholicism, he's actually trying to argue at this point that I'm about to quote, against Protestant arguments for the canon. And for Trent Horn, he realizes there's a real problem for Catholics if this fragment that we have is really early, if it goes back to the middle of the 2nd century. So Trent doesn't want to let this stand. But this is the assumption of Cameron's argument, that the canon comes from the middle of the 2nd century. But here's Trent Horn. He says there are good reasons to believe that the Moratorian fragment comes not from the 2nd century, but from the 4th century. And then he goes on to give the reasons for that. So on top of the stuff that Tony just said, there's this further issue of when do we actually date the Moratorian canon. Now, I'm not per se agreeing with Trent here, but notice that Trent is obviously not on my side of these things, and it poses a problem for Cameron. And Trent perceives that the Moratorian fragment being dated early is a problem for the Catholic view of the canon or Protestant arguments over against it.
Yeah, so okay, Cameron, Cameron, where's your video about responding to Trent, man? Huh? I don't know, maybe he's got some.
Yes, okay, and with Irenaeus, we have almost too much material because the man could literally not stop talking about the bishops of Rome. When a controversy broke out about the date of Easter, the bishop of Rome at that point, Victor, threatened to cut off entire churches in the East, and Irenaeus wrote him a letter urging peace. What was his argument? He cites in passing the policies of 5 of Victor's predecessors, the men, he says, quote, who headed the church over which you now preside. Everyone in that exchange takes the Bishop of Rome completely for granted. They're citing precedent like lawyers. But the famous passage for our purposes is his masterwork against heresies. Irenaeus.
I'm just trying to follow the reasoning here. If you're saying, hey, here's how you should do things because all of your predecessors did it this way, And Cameron compares this to quoting legal precedent and so on. Like this is, are we supposed to go, oh, therefore the succession of popes? That's what I'm supposed to do here?
Well, it seems like, and I know we keep breaking him up, but it seems like the idea is you're appealing to Irenaeus as one of your star witnesses for Luke and authorship.
I'm appealing to Irenaeus for evidence. Okay, and that means
and that same Irenaeus, I think this is what you were worried Cameron might think is legit a bit ago. The same Irenaeus speaks of papal pronouncements and procedure and so forth, and therefore you ought to accept that too. That's my guess where this is going.
Okay, let's find out.
Do you know what the controversy is? Just to let you know, David, that whole thing with Irenaeus and Victor, the Bishop of Rome, was called the Quattrodeciman controversy. And what that means is there were Christians in Asia Minor in the East who were celebrating Easter on the 14th day of Nisan, which is the Jewish Passover.
And that was wait, there are people who are celebrating it like regardless of what day of the week it was, as long as it was the 14th. And then there are other people who said, no, it's supposed to be on Easter, supposed to be on the Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Polycarp also observed the Passover on the Easter on the 14th of Nisan. And so what Irenaeus was saying was, look, he was telling Victor, he's basically telling him, look, you shouldn't force yourself on these Christians. They've been doing this since antiquity. Even Polycarp did it. But what should be noticed here is that Irenaeus did not see Victor's Bishop of Rome's decision to be final and permanent over the whole church. He challenged him on it and basically told him to be decent, be a decent individual. But then again, this is only the Bishop of Rome. You don't have this idea of the Supreme Pontiff, the Holy Father. You don't have this yet. This is not even in the horizon of church history at this time.
This says the churches can prove their teaching goes back to the apostles by listing the bishops the apostles themselves appointed. And out of every church on earth, he picks one as his showcase. Very interesting. Quote, the very great, the very ancient, and universally known church founded and organized at Rome by the two most glorious apostles, Peter and Paul. End quote. Why Rome? Well, here's his answer. Quote, for it is a matter of necessity that every church should agree with this church on account of its preeminent authority. Okay, just sit with that for a second. Like a Protestant might find some way to live with, like, okay, maybe Rome did have early bishops. Okay, there's a lot of Protestants online that argue against that, like Evan Ortland, but maybe we could accept that, call them administrators, whatever.
Why don't you make a video about it? Evan Ortland then.
Keeps the system standing. But David Wood's witness goes way further than that. Every church must agree with this church on account of its preeminent authority. There is no Protestant version of that sentence. And then David Wood's witness gives us the list, the whole list. Quote, the blessed apostles, having founded and built up the church, committed into the hands of Linus the office of the episcopate. Linus, the same Linus Paul greets in 2 Timothy, Anacletus, Clement, who had seen the apostles and talked with them, Evaristus, Alexander, Sixtus, Telesphorus, who was gloriously martyred, Hyginus, Pius, the same Pius or Fragmentus, watched to occupy the chair, Anicetus, Soter, Eleutherius, the Bishop of Rome in Irenaeus' own day, quote, in the 12th place from the apostles. 12 bishops of Rome from the apostles to his own lifetime. And he tells us how he knows this. The churches kept succession lists, and he's reporting Rome's.
I mean,
yeah,
succession. Wait, okay. Notice something, though, real quickly here. So one of the things that's supposed to be true of the Roman Catholic rejection of the sufficiency and clarity of Scripture is that they still at least believe, once they've given it credence and authorized it and given it their stamp of approval and propped it up and so forth, they're supposed to still believe what the Bible says. And it's still supposed to be the case that whatever will later pass for tradition or an infallible papal pronouncement has to be in agreement with Scripture. It may not have to be reducible to or not go beyond Scripture, which is the Protestant principle, but it has to be in agreement with it. It can't contradict it. But notice what Irenaeus says here, that the Roman church was founded by Peter and Paul. Now, who's read Paul's writings and come away with the impression that this is a man who builds on another person's foundation? First of all, he says exactly
He says
the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Secondly, Paul wrote to the Roman church. He wrote an entire epistle to the Roman church, and he writes it as somebody who's not been there, but wants to be there. He wants to go there. So wait a minute. There's already a church in Rome that Paul is most anxious to get to. When you read the book of Acts and other literature, it's evident that there were already Christians, anti-Christian church in Rome prior to Paul. I'm not saying Paul never went there. I'm not saying Paul wasn't a great luminary and light for that church. But what I'm saying is, here we have an example. He's not, he's not per se. Well, I don't know how Cameron's presenting this, but anyways, the Irenaeus is presenting this as just the way it is. But from the apostolic writings, we know that there's some flaw in this. Doesn't mean that everything Irenaeus says is wrong, but it does mean that he's not automatically right. And in this case, if you're going to accept this, notice this would undercut the reliability of the Bible. If you're going to say this is true in order to make your argument against Protestants, well, then now you've got to clean up the mess that's created, because that Paul was not in Rome when it started existing as a church, or when a church started existing there. And that same Paul speaks of not trying to build on some other man's foundation. It assumes that Paul wasn't the founder per se of the Roman church, though he did want to contribute to it. He certainly wanted to bless it and be mutually blessed or benefited, as he says in Romans 1.
And in the book of Acts, chapter 18, we read about Priscilla and Aquila. When the Emperor Claudius had given the edict to remove all the Jews out of Rome, he expelled them from Rome because they're making a ruckus about a guy by the name of Christus. They're all fighting about a guy called Christus. It was Priscilla and Aquila that came down from Rome and met Paul, and then of course Apollos. And so Priscilla and Aquila were there long before Paul went ever even set foot in Rome, if he did. And Peter as well. We're not even told that Peter, in the book of Acts, we're never told that Peter went to Rome. And so it seems that, like Anthony said, that Paul says, I don't build on another man's foundation. He never took credit for building the church in Rome. But when he talks about the episcopate, notice he says they passed the episcopate. The episcopate is basically the bishopric, the office of bishop. And all of these other sees I mentioned, the Pentarchy, Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, all of these had similar episcopates, but they were all equal to one another. They did not regard the Bishop of Rome as supreme. They saw him as primus inter pares, just like the Archbishop of Canterbury used to be considered as first among equals. But that's it. That's it. There's no sense of supremacy. The Bishop of Rome is supreme. He is infallible. None of that exists.
Little side note on the Anthony mentioning the church was already there before the Apostle Paul ever visited it. I remember I was still in I had read the book of Romans multiple times and stuff, but it was sometime while I was in prison, and it was on that issue. I was reading all the people that Paul greets by name at the end of Romans. And greet this person, greet that person, greet this person, greet that person, greet this person, greet that person. And I remember thinking, Paul knew more people by name in a church he had never been to than I know in the church that I'm in, which is in prison, with all these guys that I'm around regularly. And Paul knew more people by name than I do. So I never quite followed up on that the way I wanted to, but back then it was like, maybe I should actually know more people and get to know more people and stuff in church and stuff. But, antisocial personality disorder is real, so it didn't always work out. But let's see where Cameron's going with this.
One more thing,
But was he making?
One more thing, but remember, the Eastern Orthodox will deny everything he's saying. They will reject this idea of this supremacy of the Bishop of Rome. Again, this is vehemently denied by the Eastern Orthodox, that there was the supremacy given to Rome. They saw that as a pentarchy, again, an equal collegiate. And even the Great Schism of 1054 was seen as a papal aggression, basically commanding the Church of the East to submit to the papal powers. And again, this among other things is what spawned the Great Schism.
Yeah. Hey, Cameron, how come this isn't the orthobro dilemma that orthobros one of them want to quote Irenaeus and yet they don't accept your popery? Huh? How about that? Anyway.
It up? He wasn't the only one keeping track. A generation earlier, a church historian named Hegesippus traveled to Rome and compiled the succession list himself down to Bishop Anicetus. And where his list survives, the names match Irenaeus' exactly. Same city, same records, same names. Now, do you remember David Wood's principle? Being close to the facts makes a witness credible.
No, it makes you more credible. It's a general rule that the closer you are to the events, the less likely it is that very simple principle, guys. If someone from 5 centuries after an event tells you something versus someone who's like there, you tend. That's not the only consideration. The person who is actually there could be a total liar or something like that. So it's not the only factor to consider. It is an important one. The closer you are to events, the all else held equal, the more credible you would be. With that said, I don't even know where I'm supposed to disagree with him. If he says these are a list of the successors in Rome, I don't think I'd have a problem with that. It's where you're going with that, right? If you said, "Hey, I've got a list of the leaders from Peter all the way up until Irenaeus," okay, cool. What am I supposed to do with that? Catholic Church? What? Anyway.
Irenaeus knows a man who knew a man, so he's in a good position on the Gospels. Apply that same principle to the popes. On the popes, Irenaeus isn't relying on a man who knew a man. He knew these men. He wrote to them. He visited their city. He read their records. So which is actually easier to know? The name of whoever wrote an unassigned book 120 years before your time, or the name of the bishop you just wrote to? By David Wood's own standards, his witness, Irenaeus, is in a better position on the popes than on the naming of the Gospels. And when Zawadi pushed back in their debate, pointing out that even some ancient writers disputed gospel authorship, David Wood gave an answer he cannot ungive. Okay, let me pause the video for a second because I'm going to be a bit presumptuous. All right, if you're a man that's watching this, odds are that lust is or has been a very real struggle for you. Okay, this is not a shot against you.
I'm fine with him. I'm fine with him giving an advertisement, but we are short on time, so we're going to fast forward this because I don't know. Sometimes they're short and sometimes they're long. Not in the zit sense, but
So while you're fast forwarding quickly, the idea that first of all,
sorry, go ahead.
He's already assuming that our evidence for Lucan authorship is basically reducible, or at least the strongest we've got is going back to Irenaeus.
Yeah.
That's just not
which
true.
We would all reject.
It rests on abysmal ignorance. I haven't even given the internal evidence. Mm-hmm. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll leave that for later. For another time after Cameron thinks maybe he's got something to say in response to all this. But it's just not true that it's basically Irenaeus that we're dependent on here, though he's a good witness. But it's also not true, though, to say Irenaeus, the best he has to go on for his knowledge of Lucan authorship is, evidence 120 years removed from him. I forgot how he put that, but he was presenting it like he knows who the bishop is at his time in Rome, and yet his knowledge of Luke is of something much further back. But wait a minute. He's trying to establish, on the basis of the bishop that's near to him that he knows, who the bishop before him was, and who the bishop before him was, and so forth. Well, why doesn't he grant that same thing to his knowledge of Luke? And I mean, why is it that somehow, in other words, somehow he's jumping from Irenaeus to Luke, and the gap between the time of composition and Irenaeus saying he wrote it, and then he's comparing Irenaeus's knowledge of the bishop at his time. Why not knowledge of Peter as the first of the bishops? But that would be the point of analogy or comparison, I would think. But maybe I didn't hear him correctly at that point. I don't know. But it sounded to me like he was making a lopsided comparison.
Yeah, and I don't even understand the significance of what he's saying. If Irenaeus says this is the Bishop of Rome in my time, unless I had a reason to seriously doubt him, I would take him seriously. And even if he gives a list of all the bishops of Rome, I generally wouldn't have a problem with that unless I had some reason to think he's wrong, like we do when he says, Jesus was 50. But yeah, I'm not understanding why now I have to be a Roman Catholic or something. But maybe he's going to break it down for us.
To the video.
The point was who I appealed to, Irenaeus. Irenaeus was a disciple of Polycarp. Polycarp was a disciple of John, who's the person we're claiming wrote the gospel.
And once again, guys, the reason I went there, I was talking to Bassam. Bassam would always object because we'd normally be arguing back on like blogs and stuff like this, but Bassam was upset, and it's a stupid idea, but he's obsessed with the idea that unless whatever you're saying comes with an isnad, I got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, then you just can't know history. You just can't know anything. So knowing who I'm talking to, I can either go into a lot of detail why I think Islamic the Islam's method of history is stupid, and it's funny. All these years later, Sheikh Yasser Qadi admitted that. He said there isn't an academic in the world who takes our historical methodology seriously. He says, so I have to live a double life. When I'm among scholars, I have to act one way. When I'm in the mosque, I have to act in a different way. So could point out the problems with isnad criticism, or knowing you're talking to a Muslim, you can just say, hey, Irenaeus, disciple of Polycarp, disciple of John, boom, and then move on. But let's see what he's talking about here.
If anyone's going to know who wrote it, it would be Irenaeus. So I see no reason to reject Irenaeus' view.
I see no reason to reject Irenaeus' view. David, neither do I. I see no reason to reject Irenaeus' view that Luke wrote Luke and Acts. And I see no reason, same witness, same standard, better evidence, to reject his view that the apostles appointed Linus and that 11 men succeeded him and that every church must agree with the Church of Rome.
Where did that come from? Better evidence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What he said before is not better evidence. It's not even accurately representing the evidential case that one has for Luke and authorship of Luke and Acts. Besides that, as I said, I didn't even get into the internal evidence. There's some surprisingly good internal evidence pointing to Luke as the author that many people haven't been apprised of. But again, the evidential case is incredible. I'm not even sure where he's getting this notion that it's. I guess we do know. He cited something from Gathercole, which is hardly adequate to. I mean, pick up a introduction to the New Testament writings. Go pick up the introduction by Carson and Moo, for example. They have all kinds of evidence and argumentation showing why we have this reason for believing Mark wrote Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, and so forth. And they look at the internal as well as the external evidence. And that's just a beginning. These are introductory books. You can then progress from there into books that are actually dedicated to the topic. You can look at commentaries, which are going to treat it in the intros to the commentary, but then also at various junctures within the work where they comment on incidental details or this or that fact that points up or confirms or supports what they said in the introduction. And then you can look at whole books and doctoral dissertations defending at much greater length the pedigree of these books. What Cameron gave you, I mean, I wouldn't believe in Lucan authorship on the basis of what Cameron gave you, but I certainly don't believe in the papal office on the basis of what Cannon gave you. And you don't get what he thinks of as the papal office from Irenaeus. And Dr. Costa has been making that point, but simply talking about leaders in the church and the succession of leaders and stuff like that, the idea that this demonstrates what a present-day Catholic thinks of when he thinks of the Pope, I mean, that's just laughably bad. Nobody is just kowtowing to the Pope, even with, a lot of authority or prestige or whatever else was true of the Pope in those days. You don't have people simply accepting something because the Pope said so. And you don't have a notion of papal infallibility. You don't have the idea of making a distinction between when he speaks ex cathedra and not. It's just not there in the literature.
Yeah. Let's see.
Because of its preeminent authority. All right, so here is the new dilemma formally. Screenshot this. A second Protestant dilemma. Either the Muratorian Fragmentist and Irenaeus are reliable preservers of tradition, or they are not. Those are the only two options. Number two, if they...
Cameron the logician.
You got a doctorate in philosophy, David. You know that in order to destroy an argument, you have to show that one or two of the premises are incorrect. And if the premises are incorrect, then the conclusion that follows is incorrect. So if you look at those two premises, look at the second one. If they are reliable, then there were early Roman popes. That is such a loaded statement. There were no popes in Irenaeus' day. And so if you could prove either one of those premises wrong, his conclusion is wrong, is gone. There is no conclusion. It's false.
Well, also the first one.
The first
is,
one.
The first one is just like, it's either this or that. No, reliability is something that is open to degrees, right?
Right.
So what do you mean? They're either completely infallibly reliable or they're not. Oh, I could actually agree to you that those would be two alternatives. Either completely reliable, infallibly reliable, or they're not. But I'd go with the not there, right? But what's he suggesting? That if I don't grant completely infallible reliability, well, I just can't trust what they say on tradition. That's idiotic nonsense, Cameron. That's completely idiotic nonsense. I can think that someone is very reliable, but not necessarily infallibly reliable. Like, I'll trust them unless I have a good reason not to trust them. I can think that someone is generally reliable. I can think that someone is sometimes reliable. Like I think that the hadiths are sometimes reliable. So what's going? I mean, what's going on here? This is terrible. When you're talking about the Islamic dilemma, the Quran affirms the inspiration, the preservation, and the authority of the Jewish and Christian scriptures. And the two possibilities are either we have the inspired, preserved, authoritative Word of God, or we don't. Right. You're doing something very, very different here, dude. You're doing something very, very different here.
False dilemma.
Well,
yeah.
And I think part of the mistake is, so you said before, either the Quran is right or it's wrong in its statement that the Bible has been preserved as the inspired Word of God. You're here talking to a Muslim for whom it's all or nothing. Yeah. Right? The Quran can't be the word of Allah and be a mixture of truth and error. So it is either right or wrong on this statement. You can't say it's right on everything else but wrong on this one and still be the word of Allah. So there's something fundamentally different when we're engaging a Muslim on a question like this and the problem that this creates for them, and a Protestant, or really even a Catholic. I mean, honestly, the Catholic position, this is one of the things that really annoys me when I look at a lot of the Catholic apologetic stuff. They'll say stuff in one area that they won't say in another. I could give you quotes. In fact, I could pull them up right now. Quotes of Roman Catholic scholars who say, we do not just accept whatever a church father says. And it's not the church fathers that determine for us what is apostolic tradition. So for example, Stephen Ray, in one of his books pertaining to the canon, he points out how involved it is looking at early literature about the canon, looking at early patristic writings. And he asked the question, this is being asked rhetorically, he asked the question, are we to leave it up to every person to do the historical homework themselves and decide the canon? Or is this at the end of the day a decision of the church? And the idea is it's far too cumbersome, far too involved for everybody to work this out themselves. And so it ultimately has to be a pope or the bishops in council or what have you deciding this. And besides that, how do you interpret the fathers? This is another Roman Catholic assumption. Only they have the ability to properly interpret things. And so you can't just go to the fathers and figure this out yourself. You've got to go to them. They tell you who counts as a father, they tell you what the fathers mean, and they tell you which father is to be accepted in cases of conflict, because they do conflict. And so it's ultimately, at the end of the day, not patristic sources, but the Roman magisterium that determines these matters. So they're not treating the fathers as if their writings are all or nothing. And I don't disagree with them at that point, right? But this is what they're doing over here. That's not what they're doing when they're trying to engage in apologetics with Protestants who might not be familiar with these issues, right? When they're talking to or when it's a pop individual talking to people that may not have read stuff, what they'll do is say, well, either the Muratorian Fragmentist and Irenaeus are reliable preservers of tradition, or they're not, right? It's an all or nothing thing. But Catholic scholars and theologians and apologists of a higher order know better than this. None of them accept this sort of thing. Premise one would be rejected by good Catholic scholars. I can say that with absolute certainty.
Interesting. And we've got, like, just as an example, Cameron, we got the two Tonys here. I think they're pretty reliable. So if one of the two Tonys here said, hey, here's a list of 12 leaders or something like that, okay, well, I would believe them. If they said something and someone came along later and said, actually, they were wrong about this, I'd say, okay, then they got that wrong. I still think they're reliable. Doesn't mean they're perfect or infallible and so on. So, and I mean, what he's presented, hey, they had a list of leaders. I don't have a problem with a list of leaders. I'm wondering where you're getting the idea of your later view of what a pope is and inserting it into him giving a list of leaders of Rome. I must be missing this, but if he's comparing this to the Islamic dilemma, it must get better, because this is terrible so far.
So, one of the things he said is, I saw it in the chat. So I made the observation that a church already existed in Rome before Paul could have possibly gone there if he went there. And I'm not saying whether he did or didn't. That's a whole other discussion. But we know that there's a church there. Dr. Costa pointed out Acts 18, Priscilla and Aquila. They're coming up from Rome because of being exiled, as it were. Paul's writing an epistle to a church that's there, existing, expressing his desire to go there to be a mutual benefit. They benefiting him benefiting them. And so we know there was a church there. So Cameron said in the chat, he said, oh, it's the apostles that gave them their apostolic authority. But this would mean then necessarily downstream, down the road. But apparently they exist already as a bona fide functioning church without apostolic authority. That's already a suspicious notion to me. But without chasing that down, at what point does this happen? And was this church functioning with? He mentioned all these people that allegedly, you go back through all these different figures: Clement, Linus, Anacletus. Some would say Cletus. At what point does this list begin in the existence of the Roman Church? In other words, if you're saying the church already existed, it already had a legitimate existence before Paul ever gets there, is it already legitimately existing with Linus functioning as its first pope? In which case, how is Linus doing that without already having from Peter and Paul this apostolic authority before they even get there, right? If it's afterwards, I think there's a real problem here, and I'm not sure how Cameron thinks that all works out, but there's no evidence at all, even to begin with, that this church was awaiting some kind of apostolic authority to be a properly functioning apostolic church. You don't get that impression from the New Testament at all.
Yeah, they seem to be functioning pretty well as a church already.
Are reliable.
When Paul addresses the Roman church, he doesn't specify any particular individual. He just addresses it to the church. This doesn't mean there were no leaders there, but there's certainly no impression that Paul is saying, hey, there's this overseer over there who's in charge, and And he says nothing of the sort. All those names in Romans 16, David, that you alluded to, none of them are referring to any of these, magisterial, ecclesiastical figureheads in Rome. None of this is there. And so I think what we see here again is there's just he's reading a lot of present day Roman Catholic views of papacy and all that magisterium. He's reading all that back into the second century. And once again, I know I'm belaboring the point. It's not there. It's nowhere to be seen.
So Pope Defender says in the chat, he says, Anthony doesn't believe early church has bishops as a Presbyterian. Whenever he sees bishops, he does Dawa mode. Now, we addressed this, I think, on the last episode, but we pointed out that in the New Testament, the irony is this. In the New Testament, bishops and presbyters, so episkopos and presbyteros, these are two terms used in the New Testament. They're used to refer to the same individual from two different perspectives. It's just two ways of referring to somebody who occupies the same office. One points, it's a term that's derived from age. It can be used just to refer to somebody who's old, but it often is being used as a church office. But those people who occupy that office have the responsibility of overseeing, which is the term for bishop. They have the responsibility of overseeing the church and what's happening. So in the New Testament, these are interchangeable terms. And moreover, the churches have a plurality of these, meaning you never have a church in the New Testament that just has one presbyter or one bishop. Again, the two are interchangeable. It's always a plurality. There's no such thing as a single man running the show. So the reason I say this is an irony is he says Pope Defender says, whenever I see bishop, I go into Dawa mode because I only think of presbyters. But whenever this guy reads the New Testament, he has to see double. He has to pretend that whenever he reads the word bishop, he's reading about something other than the office of elder, when the New Testament knows of no such thing. It's not there. And Tony pointed out the other day, even as late as the time of Jerome, this is still being admitted. Jerome is admitting this is an innovation in church government. Now, I'll be honest, as far as bishops and stuff, there's a debate among people whether we would distinguish between the being of the church and the well-being of the church. You can have a church that has errors and problems in it. It's still a church if it doesn't go beyond a certain point. It has being, but it may not be as well off as it could be. And I would say there are legitimate churches, there have been in church history, where they did think that there were legitimate distinctions to be drawn between the office of bishop and the office of elder. I don't say a church is false just because some of them believe in bishops. That's I'm not putting anybody out of the kingdom for that. I don't think that's the biblical model of church government, but it's not a damning thing. In the Roman Church, though, they believe in a bishopric on steroids, because it's not sufficient for them to put one man over a church. They put a man over a bunch of churches, and then they put men over those men, and then they put another man at the top of it all, as though he were, seating himself in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. That's the sort of thing that Protestants object to, is a man usurping the place of Christ in his church, that church over which he alone is the head.
And that's apparently Dawa mode there. But let's let Cameron finish his powerful dilemma here.
And there were early Roman popes, because both sources report them. 3, if they are not reliable, then Protestants lose their grounds for Luke's authorship of Luke and Acts.
You could throw, Cameron, let me just, and I think Anthony would say the same. You could throw the Muratorian fragment and Irenaeus out, and I would still believe Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke. All right, just to be clear.
These are the only sources before roughly 200 AD that name him. And 4, therefore, either there were early popes or Protestants cannot say who wrote a quarter of the New Testament. So if we have reliable witnesses, there were early popes. Unreliable witnesses, a quarter of the New Testament just lost its author. Either way, the Protestant story of the early church is in pretty serious trouble. Now, you might be thinking, okay, maybe that's a bit clever, but so what? Like, suppose a Protestant
We were not thinking that was clever.
just shrugs, takes option 2, and says the witnesses are unreliable. What does that actually cost? Cost number 1, you already saw. When skeptics say the Gospels are anonymous, the Christian answer is not to accept that. Okay, it's to argue that we do know who wrote them. David's answer runs through, again, Irenaeus. You saw him give that exact answer to Zawadi's face. If you fire the witness, the answer dies too. Not just for David, for everyone. Ehrman's favorite argument is suddenly standing back in your living room and nobody's home. But cost number 2 is way bigger. Meet Dr. Lydia McGrew, analytic philosopher, one of the sharpest defenders of the Gospels writing today, and she's Protestant. She has no idea this video exists, which is exactly why she's useful for us, okay? Lydia has spent years arguing that the case for the resurrection can't rest on the handful of facts skeptical scholars concede, mostly from Paul's letters, because sincere belief alone can never rule out honest mistake. What rules out honest mistake for our purposes is the actual gospel accounts. A man was in a locked room, eating fish, telling Thomas to touch the wounds, appearing to groups for weeks. Nobody's honestly mistaken about that. And as for building everything on Paul, her verdict in her own words is this.
Frankly, Paul wasn't there.
Paul wasn't there. The witnesses were. Their testimony lives in the Gospels, if the Gospels come from them. And
I'm not sure exactly what she's breaking down in context there, but Paul
It could be the.
I would trust Paul on the resurrection. Paul went and talked to the apostles. At one, he met the risen Jesus. Christianity had already spread all over the place. Then he went to the apostles in Jerusalem to see if he's wrong about things, and they affirmed that he wasn't. Guys, Gospels are foundational, very important, but they're additional pieces of evidence. You've got Paul. Paul is good evidence. The Gospels are good evidence. I don't even understand. I don't even understand the point.
Besides that, this is why, I was saying before, we've got a lot of evidence, and it's incredible, and it should be used and pointed out to people. But we cut things short when we pretend like that's all there is. The apostles didn't begin there. Where they began is with the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. They considered the Old Testament superior evidence, and really the overarching consideration in terms of which one should look at the evidence. So think, for example, of 1 Corinthians 15, the go-to text when people want to talk about the apostolic proclamation and the eyewitnesses and so forth. What Paul says is, this I delivered to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried and he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures. After that, he gets into the eyewitness testimony and so forth. But Peter does the same sort of thing. If you look at his epistles, at one point he said, we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. We didn't deliver to you cleverly devised fables. We saw for ourselves the divine majesty descend upon the mountain and declare Christ to be his son. But then Peter says, and we have the word of prophecy to be made more sure. Peter, like Paul, like all the other apostolic writings, point back to the Old Testament as having a greater priority, a greater weight on our thinking and belief. That's why Paul would constantly preach from the Scriptures. But they could do this also with this rich store of evidential facts to draw from. They could say we saw this. They could say, we know people that saw this. They could say we had abundant when Luke wrote his gospel, what is Luke saying in the gospel? He says, by many incontrovertible proofs, right? He speaks as if these facts are just so dead certain as to be undeniable. So again, the point isn't to say there isn't evidence, but it's also to point out this isn't all that any of the apostles had to go on or wanted everybody else to go on. They wanted people to give serious weight to the prior Scriptures, which had already established themselves. We could talk about why we should believe the Old Testament and so forth as a further consideration, but the point is, for the New Testament church, the Old Testament scriptures were already an established authority. And so, they already had a rich foundation to stand on in order to believe in the resurrection, besides the apostolic testimony.
Yeah, and remember Paul's technical language in 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4, about what I received, I passed on to you. So there's that transmission of reliable information, what Paul calls the paradoses, what I've passed on to you. So again, like we were talking at the beginning of the show, the live stream rather, we were talking about how there was a common knowledge in early Christianity that was passed down from the Jerusalem disciples to Paul, and then he passed it down to the church in Corinth. And therefore there was this common knowledge. There was this pool of data that they had, and they didn't have to wait till the middle of the 2nd century for Irenaeus to tell us that. Irenaeus is just one witness among many. But it all seems to be an all or nothing with Cameron here.
Yeah, that is the issue. Hey, Tony, you seem to be the only one who watched this before we went live. There's about 7 minutes left. We've gotten through most of it, and we actually got to his argument and stuff. Is there something else coming up that's makes a powerful point or something?
No, not really. He just sums it up. And but he'll mention the whole thing about Irenaeus. Maybe Irenaeus was wrong. He tries to use some arguments among those who might try to dissuade the use of Irenaeus. But we've already discussed those. And we're not saying Irenaeus is wrong in everything he said because he thought Jesus was 50 years old. But he was wrong that Jesus was 50 years old. On that point, he was definitely wrong.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, I don't even know I don't even know right now where I'm supposed to disagree with Irenaeus as far as him talking about leaders of Rome. I've never seen how Cameron is getting to the later view of what popes are and reading that out of Irenaeus in a way that's making me, they got the popes right there, man. So
that's how he ends. By the way, David, that's basically how he ends the live stream.
Okay, so Cameron, if this is supposed to be some parallel to now, Cameron, if you want us to go through the rest of it, I'd be happy to go through the rest of it. But I see lots of serious problems with pretty much every step of your reasoning, and I don't see those problems with the Islamic dilemma. So if this is supposed to be a parallel to the Islamic dilemma, I have to regard this as a pretty epic fail, buddy. But you can reformulate and maybe come up with a stronger case, and maybe that'll be more persuasive there.
Or you can let those who are doing the demolition job on Islam continue, and huck your wares elsewhere.
Yeah. Oh, and again, even as I was talking about this in the beginning, Cameron just made an argument and posted it and stuff like that. I don't have a problem with that. Whereas the Orthobros are like constantly like harassing people and stuff like that. So far, Cameron's not like harassing me with this stuff. He could start, but we'll see. But all right, let's take these last few super chats here. Rogers, what's your thoughts on Redeemed Zoomer's take on schism?
So I know Zoomer is a kind of popular guy, but I haven't paid much of any attention to him. Just, I'm not trying to put him down or anything. I mean, I know he's taken shots at me because some people have told me, but it honestly doesn't mean anything to me. He was a gamer, I think. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the whole background to him. And I know that he's made some waves. So basically, for those that don't know, he belongs to a church that long ago showed it didn't really care about the gospel, and it's only gotten worse since then. I won't even get into all the desultory stuff, but if you want Mary and her wife Jane to marry you, Joe, and marry you to your husband Frank, you can find somebody in the PCUSA that'll do that. But basically, I guess his argument is that the churches that came out of the PCUSA shouldn't have left it for its liberal views and its denial of the gospel and all that. They're basically guilty of schism. I don't know all his arguments for that sort of thing, but I wouldn't agree with him. But one thing I would point out is that the PCA, of which I'm a part, didn't come out of the Northern Church. There was a division that took place between the North and the South during the Civil War period, and the Northern Church had broken away from the South during that time, and so the history of the PCA is in the Southern Church, not in the North.
The Council of Pope David and the Twin Tonys have spoken. Catholicism has been humiliated. You see, God bless you, gentlemen. Yeah, we should act like Dawa bros. Wait, I thought Paul was talking about Jesus when he said he wouldn't build on another man's church. Don't think so. Yeah.
In the context, it's very clear he's talking about the person who started the church in Rome.
1 second. What is this? Dude, what the heck? AP found out we're over here just wrecking Catholicism, and he's like, I need to help. I need to help them do it for the true church. What the heck, man?
You will all be destroyed for going after the Holy Roman Catholic Church. No, I was watching the whole thing. First off, I came here to remind you, David, that you're supposed to be live with me on my channel 10 minutes ago. Secondly, I want to greet Anthony and Tony and say hello, guys, and God bless you and all that.
You're supposed to say they're anathema, dude. You're supposed to say they're anathema.
We go by TNT.
Dynamite.
No.
Dynamite.
No,
But
we're ready to be
thirdly-
done too, because I need to get to a store before it closes.
Oh,
Thirdly,
here.
I just wanted to say one thing, which is I saw bits and pieces of Cameron's video, and I think he's doing something very sneaky there. And no offense to
Ooh,
Cameron.
that's why they call him Sneaky Cameron.
And so this is obviously also the whole disagreement and the whole gripe that the Catholics have with the
It's
the
groip. If
Orthodox
you're
and all
talking
the
about
others.
Catholics, it's groip. Okay.
with all the others, which is that he tries to somehow assert that just because Irenaeus significantly elevated, and you would say rightly so at the time, elevated the status of Rome, the Roman See, he tries to somehow equate that to the later Roman Catholic understanding of supreme, infallible authority.
That's
of Rome,
the main issue. Yeah.
which was never a thing in the time of Irenaeus. He never considered it to
with
have.
that.
I mean, he considered it to be great and to be an example to all, and to be ancient and to be old and to be the first, and to be very righteous at that time. But Pope then didn't mean the same thing that Pope laments later on, and he probably wouldn't have argued that the Roman Church is absolutely infallible and superior to everyone and all that. So
And so that's
my understanding. Right?
that everyone is why we have the Protestant Eastern Orthodox Alliance against popery. We can agree on things. You make the popular claim that Irenaeus thought that Jesus was 50. Read exact quote and citation, please. And unlike most, read the text carefully. I will actually check that out because I've only heard it a bunch of times, but I'll take a look at it.
I will tell you, I've seen some interesting takes on that and whether he was saying this or that. There are some interesting things there, but the one thing I'll just say as a just a final comment on it though is, so what? I mean, that would be one of a number of things on which everybody should be able to say he didn't get everything right. I don't know of any, honestly, like Orthodox scholar, Catholic scholar that would disagree with Protestants in thinking that the fathers, for all of their weightiness and helpfulness and everything else, couldn't ever get something wrong. There's a reason there's councils.
That would be weird if you said church fathers are infallible, like across the board, because you're gonna have some problems.
Yeah. I mean, there's councils precisely because you don't get unanimity among individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why you need the Eastern Orthodox Church to have those councils. Orthobros thinks it's funny to ask if you would spit on the Bible when they do that every Sunday blessing. Whoa! You see what AP's Orthobros do? Let's see. Church fathers never claimed to be infallible either. Early Protestants, like Puritans, were very sincere towards keeping biblical laws. They did not believe feeling in Jesus take you to heaven.
We can get behind that.
Oh, I got
Know
it.
quite
It's,
what he means.
Sounds
it's
like
Against Heresies, Book 2, Chapter 22, in the section 6, where he says, or 4, between 4 and 6, he repeatedly says it. So that's what it is.
Ram here says, sounds like Candace logic. We have a list of names, therefore popes. Actually, this was reminding me a little of Candace's debate with Andrew Wilson in a in a completely different way. But we'll get through this real quick. Let's see. Guess we're going to have to call it the gospel as addressed to Theophilus now. Yeah, we can't call it the gospel according to Luke. We have to call it the gospel as addressed to Theophilus. Orthobros make it clear that the Bible isn't an authority. It's not circular. Orthobros make it clear that the Bible isn't an authority. It's not circular. It's self-refuting.
I think the person, because of the broadcast, meant Catholics. He's referring to Cameron. I don't know what the point would be with the ortho on this.
Let's see. Anthony Rogers is it? Matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and say it since I don't know if it'll ever come up again. What reminded me of Candace and Andrew Wilson was she brings up a tweet where Andrew Wilson says that the evidence is overwhelming, and he lists a few things, and then she holds him to that, and Andrew's going, I didn't say that's exhaustive or that's my only thing. I just listed some things that are right. Part of why I would consider the evidence overwhelming. But she wanted to hold him to that as like his only case. And that kind of reminds me of Cameron. David brought up Irenaeus. So that's the only evidence, the only reason for thinking that Luke is the author and so on. Hang on. Why? We're literally trying to end this stream.
There
and
it
who
is.
do we got? Isa.
I called it.
All right.
There he is.
Well, Isa can take my spot because I have to run real quick.
There we go. Get out of here. Go to the store. Go get your go get your whiskey and
bye,
your
Isa. Bye, AP.
God bless, brothers.
Tequila. Let's see, we're almost done. What's that?
I'll let you go. I'll let you go. So take care, guys. Blessings, right. Isa. Take care.
Mm-hmm.
God bless you. Take care. Sorry.
God bless you.
Yeah. Notice once AP shows up, the Protestants are running.
I will not share the space with this guy.
What did you say, Isa?
I said AP's twin showed up too.
Yep.
They everybody ran from that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. They knew they were.
Dude,
they knew they were outmatched.
Isa, why are you saying God bless you? Aren't you a Muslim?
I believe we have to say God bless you to everyone, right? Isn't that a good thing?
Then we've got Anthony Rogers is a deceiver. He claims Protestant but sports an ortho beard. That's funny because I only read the beginning and I thought the person was attacking. So that's good. And last one here. Does Irenaeus' quote about Rome having preeminent authority prove he supported papal supremacy? Yeah, there's just too much packed into it. He's going to have to show a lot more from Irenaeus, and it still wouldn't work. But it would be more solid if he actually showed that Irenaeus packed into these things what the later church said. Anyway, all right, guys, we're going over to AP's channel now.
Raid.
How are we going to raid it? It's not even over there.
It is over there.
It started? Everyone raid AP's stream. How do I... This has been explained to me like 19 times. I have forgotten every single time.
Into the settings of the stream. And
I'm not going into any settings.
Then you go into customization and you pick redirect and you put the link of my live stream and then you click OK and then it directs everybody on there right after this is done.
I think I can just say it in the chat and then everyone can click the link though.
You could do that.
I've heard that's a thing. Hang on. Let me go. Well, first of all, why is your live stream titled "Muslims Say the Dumbest Things"? That's pretty screwed up. But what?
Because I'm referring to popular online Muslims at the moment.
It's pretty seriously messed up. All right, guys, I'm putting the link to the live stream over on AP's channel. Everyone meet us over there. We've been talking about the Catha Bros now. In the past, we've talked about the Ortho Bros. Now we're going to talk about the Dawa Bros. Saying some really dumb things.
No offense, Isa.
No offense, Isa. Yeah, Isa's like, what? They're going to talk. I was all for it when they were destroying Catholicism, but now they're going after Islam.
My mentor was actually Catholic in my my program. He was super cool. Did a lot of interfaith dialogue, so I have pretty positive feelings towards
interesting.
it. So
Catholics are based.
He was a great, may he rest in peace. He just recently passed away, but he was a really big teacher in interfaith dialogue. His name was Leonard Swidler. He was a really cool dude. So.
All right, guys. Everyone always asks why Isa is so nice and so much nicer than most of the jihadis we interact with. And now you know he was taught from birth by a Catholic. Now we know.
He was indoctrinated by the Catholics.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right, everyone. See you in about 2 minutes over on AP's channel where we're going to be wrecking some Dawa.
Inshallah.
All right. I'll watch you there.
See you all over
friends.
there. Catch you later.
Peace, brothers.